The August 7th meeting of the Portland City Council. Would you please call the roll?
Saltzman?
Here.
Novick?
Here.
Fritz?
Here.
Fish?
Here.
Hales?
Here. We're going to start this morning with a proclamation, and we have Barbara Jensen, I think, here to talk about it as in terms of what the state is doing about the Spirit of 45 Day. So come on up and tell us about this fine idea, and then I have a proclamation to read on behalf of this day.
Thank you very much.
So thank you for coming. Good morning.
Mayor Hales, members of the commission, my name is Barbara Jensen. I am a citizen of Oregon. I was born in Oregon. My father fought in World War II, and the proclamation you have in front of you is called the Spirit of 45 Day. The Spirit of 45 is a national movement across America, began with a congressional endorsement in 2010, and we have been bringing it to Oregon over the last year, and a piece of legislation was entered, Senate Bill 832, this last session, that raised the level of awareness among our executives and our communities about the importance of World War II. And the definition of the Spirit of 45 Day is not veteran, it's not memorial, it is about an entire nation that rebuilt America, that fought for our freedom, rebuilt America, and by their examples to inspire the youth of our communities today. So we're taking that message across Oregon now. Proclamations are being made. A guy named Dick Tobiasen with the Honor Flight caught on fire and made it happen in Bend and Redmond very quickly after the legislation signed by the governor June 25th. And Mayor Hales, you signed a proclamation just the other day. Thank you very much to have the city proclaim that the Spirit of 45 Day is an annual event. Now that it's in legislation, it'll be an annual event for a long time. And we appreciate your support in carrying it through. Today I have my mother with me, Joy Beebe. Joy is a member of the World War II generation. She married my father. She's an English war bride. So she lived during the bombs and the Blitz of London, watching her mother in a silhouette wonder if they were going to survive while the burning city was behind her at night. That was quite a time. In fact, she slept under a Morrison table for 5 years, which had a net around it so that the shrapnel would not harm the family. All 5 of them slept under this table. She wrote a book. Okay, I don't have the book. She wrote a book in April of last year, which would have been her 67th wedding anniversary. My father died in 1995, and in that book, she talked about what it was like to live under the duress of a war, and then what it was like to come to America with $10 in their pocket. That book was distributed to all our family members, and we were so surprised that we immediately acted to promote the book. And we took the book to the National War Brides of America, which is, you know, a reducing population, but they do have a national group. And we contacted the Spirit of 45, which we didn't know at that time. They were looking for a mascot for their organization. Edith Shane, which is the woman that is kissed by the sailor in the iconic view of the end of World War II and is in Times Square, had passed away just before the congressional endorsement in 2010. They were looking for a mascot. They asked my mom if she would do that, and within 5 weeks, we were on tour with the national campaign back to Washington, D.C., and the memorial there, and to Times Square, where they have the big celebration on the actual date that President Truman named the end of the war, August 14th, 1945. So it's been quite a journey with Mom. And we just really appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you and to tell you that this is a very special day for Oregonians now that we have a permanent day to honor this generation and talk about how our youth can be, that example can help our youth be inspired.
Mayor, before you read the proclamation, can we confirm that we're actually on live? Because our monitors aren't aren't
I
on.
believe we are. We've just got captioning problems as well, so.
Okay.
Okay, good. Glad you checked.
Okay.
Great. Would you like to add anything this morning?
You want to say anything, Mom? You want to say anything? Thank you.
It's so nice to have you both here. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
My mother will turn 90, the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. We will be in Times Square. Her English relatives may come, so
great.
it could be a very, very nice time.
Great. Well, thank you both.
I'm working on it, making it.
Thank you so much for coming. I'll read the proclamation.
And I have a couple of gifts for you, Mayor Hale.
Here, we'll stay right here and we'll
Okay.
read the proclamation
Okay.
first.
Okay.
So here's the proclamation. It says, whereas Oregon Governor John Kitzhaber has signed Senate Bill 832 into law, designating the second Sunday of each August as Spirit of 45 Day, and whereas the people of the state of Oregon honor the nearly 150,000 Oregonians who served in the armed forces during World War II, remembering the 4,000 Oregonians who made the supreme sacrifice with their lives, and whereas nearly 40,000 veterans from Portland served during World War II, over 1,200 of whom died, helping free the world of tyranny, whereas the Oregon Shipbuilding Corporation was located in Portland and was responsible for building over 1,000 Liberty and Victory ships between 1941 and 1945, in addition to building the Star of Oregon. And whereas on August 14, 1945, the people of the United States received word of the end of World War II. And whereas the victory marked the culmination of a national effort that defeated the forces of aggression and brought freedom to subjugated nations through the collective service and sacrifice by those who served in uniform and those on the home front. And whereas August 14, 1945 marked the beginning of an unprecedented era of rebuilding, during which the World War II generation created an array of organizations that helped strengthen American democracy by promoting civic engagement, volunteerism, and service to community and country. And whereas the courage, dedication, self-sacrifice, and compassion of the World War II generation has inspired subsequent generations in the United States Armed Forces. And whereas the entire World War II generation, military personnel and civilians alike, have provided a model of unity that serves as an inspiration for current and future generations of Americans. Now, therefore, I, Charlie Hales, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim the second Sunday in August of each year to be Spirit of 45 Day in Portland, to commemorate the service and sacrifice of the World War II generation and to encourage all residents to join in this observance. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could we all do a photo with our guests? Join us for a photo.
Thank you very much. And for all of you, there is an event at the state capitol. We will honor three very, very wonderful distinguished guests. Pearl Harbor survivor will be there and talking. A Congressional Medal of Honor recipient nominee will be there, and General Thayer, who the new renovated museum is being named after, will be there. These gentlemen are 90, 91, speaking to us about those examples of courage, self-sacrifice, unity, and how they gave to a nation. Thank you very much, Mayor Hales.
so much.
Yes, yes, you bet. And I'm going to give to you today the very first program of the inaugural event of the state capitol celebration, honoring, and replaying ceremony this Sunday from 5 to 7. I'm going to provide to you a limited edition of the honor flight. If you know about this, these are the World War II veterans that go back to the memorial at no cost to them. And it's a very, very wonderful program with 120 hubs across America that make sure World War II veterans go to Washington, D.C. And a little memento of the Spirit of 45 cup. And I'm sure a child in your life would love this, and a button.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for
Thank you.
being here.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is great. Well, as I know there are quite a few stories up here about that era. My dad was a veteran of World War II, and I think there are others represented here as well with stories about that generation in our lives. So I appreciate this commemoration of the greatest generation. Thank you. Okay, let's move to communications items first. We have 5, I believe.
Item 745, request of Crystal Ilinsky to address council regarding natural resources and human rights.
Crystal, you're here this morning? Crystal, are you not here? Okay, well, we'll see if she arrives later. Let's move on, please.
746, request of Michael Krupp to address council regarding communication on June 19, 2013. What will we do now that we know?
Up, come on up.
Happy to see the fire and police departments. To call you greedy would be to limit the spotlight on your persona grande to the little piggy who goes wee, wee, wee all the way home. In the garb of yet another nondescript white patriarchal corporate frontman, you are, in point of fact, the business end of a malignant cabal, assuming a certain fait accompli, the premature burial of our water, attempted grand theft, hydro, and like a pale, horseless, priapatic conquistador, you nakedly set about the rape, pillage, and plunder of our blessed city. You attempt to banish our water, which is indeed holy, to the realm of darkness below, with the oozing sincerity of Boris Karloff as a funeral director, offering his deepest condolences. In the fashion of Randy's reverent sympathies in a Tibetan memorial for 13 victims of self-immolation, demonstrating the atrocities of the Chinese Communist Party, while Sammy signed deals in Shanghai. Armed with a game plan from hell devised by a Pluto in Carl's clothing, you attempt to pull a Cheney. Even your doppelganger, Sorry Charlie I, a rejected star-cussed tuna, wouldn't swim in your subterranean drinking sewer. And we hereby cease to swallow your swill. Go ahead and dick around with all our institutions, schools, hospitals, city services, elections. This is your stock in trade. But water is not an institution, not to be dicked about, stocked, or traded. I know you are a lifelong member of the crypts. Perhaps you even sleep in one. As a doctor, I see the gross defects in your thought processes and your morbid love of the dark. I know, it smells like money down there. But before you toss your career under the bus, I suggest you look around. Whatever became of Sam and Randy? They too had megalomaniacal delusions. Money was their Viagra. Emperor hails. Where are your clothes? Cover yourself, not our reservoirs. We are a family city. Cease and desist your mad efforts. Pretend the overwhelming outrage of the people made you see the light, just a figure of speech. By virtue of your momentary position, you must consider yourself one sly dog. But water is a community bone, not here to fulfill your client's wettest dream. You can't possibly bury it while millions watch. Think of yourself as President Obama in this Congress. You ain't going nowhere. You ain't going nowhere.
Thanks. Good morning. Next.
Item 747. 747, request of Taz to address council regarding homeless issues and R2D2.
Morning, Council and
Morning.
Mayor. I'm here to represent RTD2. First of all, I want to say thanks a lot for the money that we did get to receive. Everybody else received, that's all right, because we're doing all right ourselves out there. We're making it. All we're asking is if you guys get a chance to really come down without your bodyguards. Nobody's going to hurt nobody, but come down and really see what we're doing. People are more wanting more of RTD2 because they are safe there. They get their nourishments. They get their sleep. They can go to work. There's no other place, man. The mission, the money you gave to the missions, other places, they're running shelters, and then they kick everybody out at a short period of time. We don't. We give them a 12-hour rest. And all we're asking is the fine to be stopped. All you're thinking is that you guys want to be voted. You know you can stop the fines. But you're afraid if you stop the fines, that everybody be pissed off at you. It's just like the Indians got the land taken. They survived on a small little piece of a little property. If they wanted to grow something, they had to take and give the money to the city, and the city tells them how to run it. All we're doing is that little spot is growing, and we're getting bigger. We need more room. We need the fine stopped so we could grow. Y'all think that we are living, one of these times you're all going to be around the corner, just like we are. You know, different. Go sleep in the doorway some night. I'd like to see you guys go sleep in the doorway and be harassed or kicked, just like that basketball player, Portland. Innocent person kicked for no reason. $43 to keep his mouth shut. A bribery? We don't deserve that. There's more people are going to be out on the streets because the taxpayers' money, because all of us are coming after the homeless instead of going after the middle-class people and doing something with them. We need to be stopped. We need the fine stopped now. That's what we're asking us. This is stop and let us go on. The fines need to be stopped. That's what RTT is asking you, is to come and watch us and do a security check, how we do it, how we check people in, how polite we are. The missions are not like that. They're rude. We're not rude. We treat people with respect because we're just still out there. We're just the same as them. So we're asking y'all, take a time and come and watch us and see how it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
7:48, request of Christopher Perkins to address council regarding homeless issues and right to dream 2.
Yeah.
Pardon?
No, we don't do alternates, so if he's not here, we'll have to ask him to come back. Next one, please.
Item 749, request of Mary Eng to address council regarding Portland
Mary?
police beating of Benjamin Pickering.
And Mary, just you, just one person. No, no.
He's going to be silent.
No, you need to sit down and let her speak.
I
'cause
just
one-
wanna
one
show
pers-
you.
One
Okay.
person at a
Yes,
time
sir.
gets
You're
to
the
sign
boss.
up. So go have a seat, sir. Please. No, please go have a seat. No, go have a seat in the audience. Thank you.
Actually, I don't need the mics. I'm going to just...
So, no, go have a seat, sir. She's got the floor. No, and you need to come sit and speak to the council so the TV can pick you up.
Terry had it. Okay, you're right. I liked Terry's playing to the crowd. Proscenium stage, it's good.
Okay.
Hello, good morning. My name is Mary Rose Lenore Eng. All of us are heroes to somebody, each and every one of us in this city. We've got a lot of heroes in this room. I'm looking around at heroes. Heroes. I'm really proud to be in the presence of all of you. I think my biggest heroes are the people on the street, a lot of them veterans. Benjamin Pickering is a hero to a lot of people, hundreds of people, possibly thousands of people. They've got a big family. I'd like you to reaffirm our jurisdictional cooperation with Washington in helping Benjamin Pickering get back to Washington to continue his work with a homicide investigation that nearly robbed him of his life. Ben has suffered a lot, and I don't want to go into too many personal details of the many, many ways he's suffered. But the Portland police attack on Benjamin Pickering, grinding his blind left eye into the ground at 8868 Ace Tavern on Northeast Sandy, is something I find highly disturbing. And I know we have a lot of police brutality in this city. I'm actually taking a break from the deep throat pepper spray case across the way with David Landrum, who is an embarrassment to the city for verbally abusing a victim of police brutality, victim blaming her, misogynistically grinding her into the ground with such an abrasive and disrespectful tone that I can only wonder once again at the state of the rule of law in Portland, Oregon. But I'm willing to renew my hope in you guys. I'd like to politely ask you to refrain from any personal street harassment via your IPR agent. That's the Independent Police Review. We're doing more background, trying to get all the medical records that will firmly establish Benjamin's needs. And then we're trying to get the best consultation. I would like to request a public inquest and inquiry, the way they do in England, where, say, for instance, with Jimmy Mubenga, we have a public inquiry where members of the public who possibly have been witnesses or could be character witnesses could vouch that Benjamin is actually an unpaid gardener and street sweeper who you guys have a debt of gratitude to for working pro bono or as a slave for City Hall and in the front yard. And I do hope you will help him financially. He's suffering, I'm suffering. His Social Security has been embezzled by Nicole with her group Financial Management, Inc. So July was really hard for us financially. I never expected to fall in love with a police brutality victim from the city of Portland where I was born, the city for which I'm named, Mary Rose, granddaughter of Mary Kangas, also known as the Scourge of Portland. I hope I can bring some hope and light to this situation, given the serious gravity of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Before we start the rest of the calendar, we have a guest here to welcome, who's Mayor Ito Katsumi, who's the mayor of Gosen City, Japan, who's here for a visit to Portland. I want to welcome him and say, welcome to Portland. Thank you for coming.
Oh, is it? But it's up there? We just can't see. Like actually progress.
All right. We'll move on to the consent calendar. I believe we have a request from Commissioner Fish to pull back item 757
Take
to
that
his
back to my office, Mayor.
Yes. Any objection? Any other items to be pulled or taken back to council offices?
Let me read the title for 757. Is authorized grant agreement with Southwest Neighbors, Inc. to provide education, outreach, and community involvement for watershed projects in Fano, Tryon, and Willamette watersheds up to $73,000 for fiscal year 2013-14.
Okay, that's returned to Commissioner Fish. Any other items to be pulled? And if not, then a roll call on the balance of the consent calendar.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Novick?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hales?
Aye. Time certain, item 750.
Transmit report on the City of Portland electronic record keeping, a roadmap to improved practices and compliance.
Auditor Griffin Valade, good morning.
Good morning, Mayor Hales and Council. I'm Levon Griffin-Vlade, City Auditor, and I'm here just to very briefly introduce from the Auditor's Office, the team from the Auditor's Office presenting our report on the city's electronic record-keeping system. Chief Deputy Auditor Sarah Landis will be leading the presentation along with Tim Hunt, Records Analyst in the Archives and Records Management Division. I want to thank them for their hard work and their leadership in managing this really important part of city government's business infrastructure. I would also like to thank the citywide TRIM Steering Committee who helped us on this project. 9 other bureaus contributed staff time to this effort and assisted us with developing recommendations for an expanded rollout of TRIM. Finally, I would like to share my appreciation for the 3 very busy bureau directors who will join us as guest presenters this morning. Anna Canwit from HR, Jim Van Dyke from the City Attorney's Office, and Ben Berry from the Bureau of Technology Services. Now I'll turn it over to Sarah. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share this report with you. I think Tim is going to pull up the slideshow. The purpose of this presentation is to provide you with a status update on the city's electronic record-keeping efforts. We want to remind Council about the risks of not properly managing the city's information and document assets, specifically electronic records. We also want to present the recommendations of the citywide TRIM steering committee that Levon referenced that was convened to look into TRIM implementation. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with TRIM, it's the electronic records management system purchased by the city and administered through the Archives and Records Management Division in the Auditor's Office. This report is our best thinking by our office and members of the steering committee on how we can make improvements and why we need to. There is a lot of detail in the report, and it raises a number of questions about how the city can improve its practices. I'm going to keep my presentation at a very high level today, but we're happy to go over the report in more detail with you at your convenience if you'd like. Next slide. So why this report? The information environment that drove this office 12 years ago to undertake serious efforts to improve the city's electronic records management practices has grown in both scope and complexity since that time. City policies put in place to guide bureaus are not universally followed. A technology solution exists and is owned by the city but is not available to all employees. Myths prevail about data being backed up and preserved. Costs of recovering data rise because there's no unified logic in how it is structured. Storage costs rise because of duplicative records, and retention requirements are inconsistently applied. The city's records and information are an important infrastructure asset, much like its buildings, street, or sewer lines, and ignoring these assets puts the city at legal and financial risk in the future. We've tried to capture those risks in this report, but perhaps a visual image will help. This is a photo of boxes holding thousands of the city's paper records. They are being professionally cataloged, managed, and stored in our Archives and Records Center. If you need a document, you will be able to find it. This is not a photo of city records, but I thought it a fitting metaphor for how many in the city generally handle their electronic records. The flood of email and electronic documents that employees receive and create get dumped into drives and giant PST files, so that if you need to find a document, it might be like searching through this dump. The record is there, but finding it is extremely difficult. While our management of our paper records is generally good, we are required to treat electronic records the same way we do paper records, and we have a long way to go before we're there. This slide outlines the benefits both to city employees and to the public of a good electronic records management system. A few of these benefits are ease of access to information, historic or life cycle preservation, compliance with laws and rules, and greater transparency to the public. For those of you who aren't familiar with our terminology, e-files is the public-facing interface with TRIM, and it allows the public or employees to search and view documents in TRIM that bureaus have designated for open access. You may be most familiar with e-files in your search for past council documents. So what are the problems with the current practices? The status of electronic record-keeping efforts in the city is spotty. In general, we found a lack of compliance with the rules, risk of losing records with long-term retention value, lack of strong lines of responsibility and accountability for records, records that are largely uncontrolled or dumped in large folders or deleted without proper retention. Citywide, there is a strong need for more tools and training, and there is a lack of funding to support a long-term strategy to ensure citywide compliance. Here we're showing some of the deployments we've helped implement around the city, as well as some statistics from the last fiscal year. Council records, city personnel files and contracts, police incident reports, Bureau of Environmental Services project files, elected officials correspondence, and BDS, Bureau of Development Services permit records are all some of the implementations of TRIM that we've been successful with. Most deployments, such as the ones I just mentioned, have been to specific areas in bureaus where TRIM meets a specific records management need, although there has been scattered implementation to individuals and to entire bureaus. There are currently 1,100 active users, over 1,100 active users of TRIM, and hundreds of thousands of documents being managed and viewed in the system. This is a sort of busy slide, but we pulled this out to give you a flavor of what people are looking at. It's the most often viewed records in e-files since last July. It shows the diversity of information that's available and of interest to the public and internally. So the first most commonly viewed file with almost 5,400 views was an agenda from a Bureau of Development Services Design Commission meeting in 2012. And if you go down the list to the last record there, number 10, with over 1,100 views, the 10th most popular document was minutes from a Docs Commission meeting in 1951.
I want to look that one up.
We think that's related to the Superfund research
That's probably when
that's
it
going
began,
on.
yeah, right.
But it shows the wealth of what we have in the system, and it also kind of highlights the risk of what we might be losing if we don't get a better handle on our records. The next slide is a timeline, a high-level timeline of where we've been with electronic record-keeping efforts. In 1999, we made our first request for funding before council, and were successful in that request.
Excuse me.
In 2001, the first TRIM licenses were purchased and the first implementations began. In 2006, funding for citywide TRIM implementation was requested, but was not supported by council at that time until additional research and work was done. In 2009, an ordinance was passed and administrative rules were adopted to give clarity to the roles and responsibilities for Bureau directors and employees, and to beef up expectations for electronic record keeping. In 2011, despite all this effort, we're still seeing city bureaus struggle with their records. There was increased interest from bureaus in getting TRIM established, but we're at a tipping point in terms of exhausting current licenses and staff resources. So we convened the TRIM Steering Committee to help us get a handle on these issues for the future. The TRIM Steering Committee was convened, as I said, to help guide our office to improve record-keeping practices across the city and furthering implementation of TRIM. It recommended priorities, planned timelines and objectives, and identified the funding and staffing resources necessary for a citywide implementation. As part of the work that the steering committee conducted, we did a record-keeping survey to get a sense of the needs for record-keeping help in bureaus. This survey was aimed at management-level contacts who had a general sense of record-keeping activities in their bureaus. The results were in some ways worse than we had feared. The next slide will highlight just a few of the results from that survey. There was a strong awareness among the group of the administrative rule that applies to electronic records, but it was not universal, even among those who were identified by bureau directors as the records specialists in their bureaus. Respondents were split on whether or not staff were aware of retention schedules governing their records, and there really were not strong results in having procedures to identify and retain official records, and there was no strong process for retention and purging of unneeded records. We believe that the results of this survey are indicative of the general trends we've been seeing overall in the city. So based on discussions, this survey and other information gathering that the steering committee did, the committee developed findings and then corresponding recommendations to improve electronic record keeping and expand deployment of TRIM citywide. Recommendations include ensuring records management responsibilities are understood and accepted, establishing an advisory committee to ensure input from bureaus, enhancing training, monitoring and enforcing compliance with the laws and rules, encouraging best practices and compliance with the rules, developing a funding model to support program growth, and expanding TRIM based on the priorities identified by the committee. The steering committee left development of a plan to implement the recommendations to the auditor's office. We've outlined a draft 5-year implementation plan in this report and in the appendix of the report provided to you. There are sections on policy and governance, training, TRIM administration and testing, staffing, finance, scheduling, compliance and monitoring, and software and IT infrastructure. We see this plan as a starting point to raise council's awareness of our concerns and the risks to the city, and to explore what resources are needed to fully capitalize on the early investments we made in TRIM. We hope to sustain the momentum we currently have and to ensure that we don't lose our ability to provide transparency, ease of access to information, and long-term preservation of those records we produce today that will be tomorrow's historical asset. We'll plan on coming to council with a funding proposal during the next budget cycle, and as I mentioned earlier, we can provide any additional details or conversation about the plan at that time or individually with council members or staff. We're happy to answer any questions you might have about this presentation, but first we've asked Bureau Directors Anna Canwit, Jim Van Dyke, and Ben Berry to each say a few words about their perspectives on improving the city's electronic record-keeping practices.
Okay, great. Thank you. Come on up, and then we'll see if there are questions for any of the team. Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, City Auditor. I'm Ben Berry. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the City of Portland. I'm the Bureau Director for the Bureau of Technology Services. I'm going to read my comments this morning, Mr. Mayor. BTS is keenly aware of the scale and the proliferation of email and electronic records. First, the cost of dumping electronic records into storage is growing and won't decrease until documents and data are deleted based on their retention schedules. Bureaus are responsible for adopting retention schedules. And secondly, BTS is often called on to search those records, and this is an extremely expensive and time-consuming effort in the current environment. BTS backups are performed for short-term recovery purposes and do not constitute compliance with retention laws and best practices. Proper records management reduces the unnecessary duplication of data, secures records from accidental destruction, and applies a structure that helps both employees and the public find the information they need. Our records and electronic records contain information that must be managed just like any other city asset. BTS recognizes the efforts to improve the city's electronic records management and rollout of TRIM must be a partnership between BTS as the infrastructure providers, the Auditor's Office as the policy and technical assistance body, and the bureaus as the owners of the records. I have committed BTS to this partnership and will work closely with the Auditor's Office. We also recognize that we have multiple electronic record systems here in the city, such as TRIM, SAP, and Microsoft 365, soon to come online. As we work through the citywide technology assessment initiative, we can better identify the best use of these electronic records platforms and how best to fully implement these technologies and integrate them for the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who's next?
Okay. Anna Canwit, Director of Bureau of Human Resources. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. What I'm going to talk about a little bit is our, in the Bureau of Human Resources, use of TRIM and its value to us. We have moved to TRIM for the maintenance of the personnel files, the official personnel files for all employees, all of the discipline documents, and all of the medical files, including family medical leave and Oregon family medical leave documents. The advantages are many. Key is confidentiality of those records, the ability to separate them and to create subfolders so that we can restrict access to those files only to those who have clearance to look at those important documents. But the other advantage is, at the same time, multiple people who have that access can view the documents at the same time. So we don't have to print the documents out and provide copies. And partly, whenever you do that, there is a risk that those copies end up in the wrong place and are not, the confidentiality that's so important is not maintained. Archiving is way easier with the electronic files. We do scan them in, and then they are documented. They have the date set for destruction so that shows up when the documents are appropriate for destruction under our records policies. It very much reduces the workload if you, as Sarah showed in the PowerPoint, to archive them in the center. Although it's a wonderful center, we have to place them in boxes. We have to be sure the boxes are appropriately marked so we can find what's in there again, and marked so that documents that should be destroyed are. So it's a huge workload savings for us to be using TRIM. Finally, of course, the documents in TRIM cannot be edited, so that's another safety feature with the documents that we maintain. So overall, although there isn't a cost savings per se for our bureau to be using this for these important records, it certainly creates efficiencies for us, and those will be greater as we move to more and more electronic-based systems, and we are moving less paper and changing that into electronic documents. So we've had very good experience using TRIM for, as I said, these important employee records. Thank you.
Jim.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Jim Van Dyke, City Attorney's Office. I've been asked to say a few words about the perspective of keeping good records from a legal perspective. And as you know, we have requirements imposed upon the city by state law to keep public records and to establish retention schedules for public records. Our office assists bureaus when they have public records requests, and we have encountered many times problems trying to recover those records to provide them as we're required to do by law. Obviously, when we're unable to do that, or we have to go back multiple times and trying to find the records, it damages the city's credibility. And that's a very valuable commodity. So record retention is very important, I think, from that standpoint, both to comply with state law and from our own credibility standpoint. We also have responsibilities imposed by law when it comes to litigation and potential litigation. We are required by the courts to produce documents responsive to people's requests in the litigation. We need to do that. If we don't do that in a timely and responsive manner, we can be fined by the courts. They can impose penalties on us. And of course, just the mere failure to discover the records that we need can hurt us in a litigation perspective. So from our perspective, from our office's perspective, we need a good electronics records retention system. I want to thank the City Auditor's Office for working with us on this. I also want to thank Ben Berry of BTS because we're also collaborating with him on this. In fact, we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning to work on one aspect of electronic records retentions.
Great. Thank you, all. I know there's some questions from council. I'm not sure if it's for you or for the auditor.
Yeah, I'll start with this panel if I
Yeah.
could. First to Ben. Ben, we've set up a technology oversight committee which reports to the council on a regular basis on all of the new technology projects to make sure we're on time, under budget, and flagging issues that come up. And I think I, along with my colleagues, have found that very helpful to have a regular oversight body bringing problems to our attention upstream and giving us ongoing reports. Do you think that might be the model for how we take the recommendations and implement it here in terms of an oversight process?
Commissioner Fish, fellow commissioners, and Mayor Hales, I think we could look at that directly, and I think TRIM has actually presented at TLC early on when I was on the TLC, and I'd like to test that question with the TLC and bring back an answer to you. But I think that body is an oversight team that could play a role in review as we implement.
And I think you're actually in a very good position to evaluate. We have different models of oversight bodies and reporting to council. Some work less well than others, and I'd be interested in your thoughts about what a high-functioning, should it be independent of staff, or should it be staff-supported with an independent group? Should it be alternatively composed of senior leaders within the city? How best do you get compliance? Because I think some of the data here is pretty alarming about the slippage. So how do you get people's attention and make sure that consistent policies are applied and enforced?
Commissioner Fish, one of the things that the technology assessment will ferret out is a high-level governance structure for enterprise-wide initiatives, which will have bureau directors sitting on that enterprise governance structure along with staff support. I'm hoping to see that kind of a recommendation and the structure for that, which could in fact enable what you're discussing now.
Good. And to the city attorney, the sense that I often get is that you have a manpower person. You have a problem of bodies that can handle the current workflow. and public records requests are coming with greater frequency from the media and from citizens. They are more and more involved, and it, as we know, takes a lot of time to get it right. And you can't just do a document dump. One of your obligations is to screen the documents to make sure nothing that's privileged or confidential or that contains information protected under privacy laws is disclosed. So that it isn't just simply identifying documents that might be responsive. They have to be reviewed to make sure we don't violate people's rights in the disclosure of those documents. Do you believe that you can step up and meet your component of this project without additional bodies?
Commissioner Fish, Mayor, other commissioners, I think we're hanging on by our fingernails right now in terms of the number that we're getting in, so that if we get a flood more in, we're going to have a problem. This isn't, to be fair, this isn't a problem I've particularly identified before the council, but we have long talked within the office about identifying a particular attorney to handle all the public records requests that come in, because they develop a particular expertise. They work with the district attorney's office. If those matters get appealed, it provides consistency of advice. There's a lot of good reasons for doing that, but at present, we're not able, I don't feel like we're able to designate a particular person just because of the volume.
So, Mayor, we do have this innovation fund that you set aside. My guess is if we look at best practices, there are dedicated people in other cities that are responsible for public records requests, compliance, and record keeping retention. One of the things that's come up, which is a new twist, which adds another layer of complexity, is often we get two kinds of requests for the same document. One is in connection with litigation, where Jim's office compiles documents, and then at some point subsequently a public record comes in. And the truth is, in order for us to be consistent and thorough, we actually need to cross-reference those two. We need to make sure that the public record request picks up any documents that the lawyers found through discovery that are arguably responsive, and vice versa. And ultimately, if we don't link those up, we are putting our credibility at risk. Because if we're giving one set of documents to a reporter, another set of documents to a lawyer, that's where we can get into trouble. And if the goal is to make sure we produce everything that we are legally required to, it's very time intensive. And I just wonder, rather than just keep putting this off for further study and more data that's somewhat discouraging, maybe we ought to look at this as, through the Innovation Fund or even through our reserves, to have a dedicated person who really becomes the quarterback, who in turn guides us through all these recommendations.
No, it's worth looking at. Yeah, I mean, the other hope, of course, with technology, it's not just a hope, it's a pattern, is that the search capabilities keep getting better and the user friendliness of the software keeps getting better, so that the ability of those of us who have other things to do to operate the system is improved. That it doesn't get more and more arcane, that it gets more and more usable for folks that have other responsibilities. How fast is that curve rising, versus the workload curve? I don't know, but that's...
Well, and I think, but the concern that I have is every day we read in the paper of some breach of privacy in some private sector setting. And some of that is just bad technology, sloppy oversight, but we actually are custodians of information that we are not legally allowed to share with people.
Right.
HR files, confidential advice from attorneys on matters, all kinds of things. And they often show up as attachments or email trees or they get forwarded. And I think we're probably at a point where having someone who is the public records czar, who has expertise and centralized in Jim's office, working in the auditor's office, is probably long overdue.
Worth exploring. Thank you. Other questions for our bureau directors or for the auditor team?
I have a question for the auditors team.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, first, thank you for bringing this report and indeed for the services that you provide with TRIM. I got many trainings in my first week in office in 2009, and I think the one on public records retention and how to do it was perhaps the most helpful and memorable. And in particular, went to Lord Brian Brown in your office, who has helped set up my TRIM so that it's just automatic. And I find it the most helpful electronic tool that I have, even notwithstanding my calendar and everything else, because it's searchable and I can I can access it. And I think I'm surprised that the utilization is so low, given that it's such a great tool and so easy to use. My first question is, what does TRIM stand for?
It stands for Total Records and Information Management.
And that's what it does. So I think that's excellent to know. And then my second question is, can you, as a follow-up, get me a breakdown? I noticed that you have 1,100 folks using, city staff working, using TRIM. I'd like to get a breakdown by bureau of who is and who isn't. I'm delighted that the Bureau of Development Services has the most hits on that one particular item. But I'd like to know so that I can provide some accountability and so that I can measure how many staff in my bureaus are using it and see some progress in that. So would that be possible to get me that?
Yeah,
And
good suggestion.
Bureau of Development Services has just completed, I think, a new project that pulls plans and into Portland Maps, and those plans reside in e-files. Is that correct?
TRIM,
So that's a great interface between the new system that they're using and TRIM, and just sort of shows the power of being able to integrate, our data with the other tools that we need. And so that's been a great project.
That's a good suggestion. Why don't you provide that information to all five of us, because I'd like to see that as well.
Absolutely.
And then I'll follow up with Ben Barry and Technology Services. I'm presuming that the new computer at Bureau of Development Services will be able to talk to TRIM. Do you know that already?
Are you referring to the ITAP?
Yes.
Yes, that is the plan.
So I think obviously moving forward, that's another check on our Technology Oversight Committee and others to make sure that since we've got a system that's working, we make sure that everything else plugs into that. So thank you very much both for this report and for your service on this. It's made my life immeasurably easier.
You've highlighted Administrative Rule 8.12, and we have some experience with rules that are particularly important where annual refreshers are useful, particularly in a time where you have new staff people coming, new electeds. Is it your view that the council would benefit from an annual in-office tutorial on 8.12?
I think that's a fantastic idea, and ultimately we'd like for acknowledgement of 8.12 to be part of what every city employee acknowledges on an annual basis, and to include that kind of training in onboarding for new employees once HR has that up, but definitely an annual refresher for council.
Having watched Anna and her crack team take 2.02, which is an HR rule, and turn it into a box you check when you're hired, and then a requirement of training, and then subsequent follow-up, I would strongly encourage HR to work with you to set up 8.12 for the same purpose, and at a minimum, make sure that the council offices and bureau directors get that training, and you have the benefit of bureau directors meeting as a group, and then council offices meet. You in your recommendations, you talk about wanting some dedicated funding and what a system would look like. Have you put pen to paper on what that would look like?
We have. It's almost a year old at this point, the figures, but the steering committee recommended that we look at a 5-year implementation for the system, and it has components of purchasing additional licenses, getting additional staff resources for us, both for training and for the management of the infrastructure, and then for assisting with a rollout, and that kind of builds up in year 3 and then comes back down in year 5. But we have fleshed that out.
So can you furnish that with the council?
It is in your report, and I can pull it out as a separate document for you, and be happy to brief you on those.
Maybe highlight
details.
In the report, I'm looking at the PowerPoint, but you're saying it's in the
report document.
Appendix C3, I believe.
Yeah, Appendix C3.
Okay.
And then Appendix D sort of is the outline of what our plan year by year for the 5-year rollout would look like.
And so the proposed expenditures in C3 will start to show up as budget proposals? Is that how that comes forward?
That's what we're hoping to do this year. We had planned to come with this report and a proposal last year, but clearly the environment for budget requests was not good at that point. So the steering committee advised that we wait until this year to come forward with a proposal.
Do you have an opinion as to whether we would benefit from having public records czar located either in the city attorney's office or in the auditor's office?
I think it would be a great idea to have somebody dedicated to coordinating all of the requirements because they are different. The public records requirements that we have for just managing the city records are different than the litigation requirements and legal holds that have to be put on things. I think it would be a good idea to have somebody who had as their sole responsibility pulling together a system that did that.
And just, again, because I mentioned it when Jim was here, I think having the left hand and the right hand track disclosure through discovery with public records is useful because we have got to make sure we're consistent in producing the same documents, even if they come as requests in different ways.
Yeah, agree.
I have one more question. And the other tracking system we have is called Trackit. How does Trackit interact with TRIM?
There is no direct interaction between Trackit and TRIM, to my knowledge. Trackit, I think, is, I'm not especially familiar with Trackit, the functionality of that.
I think Trackit is a system to just track a request for something through to the end, but that is not being cataloged in TRIM at this point.
So that's something that we might want to add in as we look at expanding the system, because that when people fill out a contact form on Portland Online, it tends to go to Trackit rather. And so to have a mechanism to make sure that when we ask for public records, for example, but also from my own knowledge that if I ask, I don't have to ask in both places. And Trackit doesn't have as much search capacity in my experience as TRIM does. So that would be really helpful to be able to get Trackits into TRIM so that then we could just search in one place.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Other questions, comments from council? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone signed up to testify on this?
One person, Mary Ng.
Are you still here? Okay, I think she's left. So I believe what we need is a motion to
Motion to
accept
adopt
the report. And
Second.
I think we're accepting, not necessarily adopting in this
Accepting,
case,
excuse me.
because we have budget proposals involved in it.
Motion to accept.
Is that right, Sarah?
I actually don't think there's any vote required on this report. It was just a presentation. We'll be fleshing out the details of the plan
Okay.
and the budget
So
later.
you don't need us to accept
Nope.
the report in order to move
If
forward
we
with the rest
accept
of
it, it gives us an opportunity just to comment on it.
So we'll accept it anyway.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
it goes into the records.
Excellent.
Thank you. Any further council comments before roll call on accepting the report? Roll call, please.
Saltzman,
Well, thank you for your report. Aye.
Novick,
Thank you very much. Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you for your service. This is important, both to help us get our work done and to be accountable to the public. Aye.
Fish.
Excellent report, and what I'd particularly like to see coming out of this process is a menu of options for what the oversight body would look like and how we actually are able to get compliance across bureaus. 2, whether a public records czar of some type would be valuable. Reminded that I think one of the first people that President Obama hired was a regulatory czar, with an instruction that no new regs could be promulgated at the agency level without going through this person. And given the volume of public records requests and other requests for information, I think it's probably long overdue that we are coordinated. And having someone who specializes in that and with an idea of making sure the public gets timely and comprehensive responses, I think is very important. So thank you for your excellent work. Aye.
Hales.
Yeah, thanks for this important and thorough look at the management problem that we have. Very important. Just one comment I'd make is it just seems to me that we're in this avalanche of technological change and information overload. And government needs to be following those trends, but be far enough behind the curve that other people try things out before we do. But not so far behind the curve that we're getting out of touch or inefficient. And again, my sense is just that the rate of change isn't slowing down. We're in the process of installing in-car cameras in some of our police vehicles. They download data when they come back to the precinct. There are huge amounts of data to manage and privacy issues to discuss as a community as we implement that. I think I've told you some of the story. I was at the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting and got to try out the prototype Google glasses, in which there's a camera and an internet transponder here. Imagine, both with anticipation and perhaps with recoiling, if each of our firefighters and police officers were equipped with such a device as they did their work. We would have little doubt about what happened at each incident and almost no privacy as a community if those records were generally available. So how do we balance those changes that come with this technology? It's going to be an ongoing discussion as a community and in-house with our experts in your office and Ben Berry's office and elsewhere. But my sense is we're going to be talking about these subjects a lot because the pace of change is accelerating, and the amount of data that we have to manage and how people want to get to that data is changing just as fast. So thanks for this look at where we are today. Thank you. Aye. Good work. Okay, let's move on to the regular agenda.
Item 758, authorize an alternative selection process for the compliance officer and community liaison contract to comply with the City of Portland and Department of Justice Settlement Agreement.
Let me start by thanking Commissioner Fritz for her work on this. She's focused on this. This is one of the questions that she's focused on in the Department of Justice settlement. Very important matter of how we select this critical staff person and how we make sure that we're doing that in a way that works. So a call for resumes as opposed to a more formal RFQ process or an RFP process is before us. I think this is a great idea. It will allow a larger pool of applicants to submit for the position and attract more and more diverse candidates. The council is going to continue to work with the community and with the Police Bureau and everyone else in the implementation of this settlement agreement, but this is an important step. I'm going to get this in front of the community and the council today. And again, Commissioner Fritz, thank you for your leadership on this.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your partnership. There's a new spirit of cooperation and collaboration, I believe, that embraces the community as well as the council. I'm going to read from the ordinance, which was prepared by Ellen Osnuck in the City's Attorney's Office, who has been our lead on this and has done stellar work. She's not able to be here today. The City of Portland has entered into the settlement agreement with the United States Department of Justice to improve the policies and practice of the Portland Police Bureau relating to serving or responding to individuals experiencing mental illness. And of course, as we all know, the court has not yet determined that the agreement is final. However, we have entered into that agreement. And when we discussed this a couple of weeks ago, there was general agreement that we should not wait until the court has finalizes the agreement to start moving on some of these critical elements. We also discussed how we would put this, I would put this with the mayor on today's agenda so that we do absolutely every step of the process in an open and transparent and accountable manner so that everybody can comment. So that's what we're doing today. So the agreement specifies that the city is responsible for hiring a compliance officer, community liaison to perform the duties identified in the agreement. And again, that means that the duties are identified in the settlement agreement, which may or may not change, but a regular process would include a request for proposals to say, how are you going to do this? That may be part of what we'll be asking for in this alternative process, but what the compliance officer is going to do is laid out in the settlement agreement. We won't need to discuss that. What we will need to do is to make sure that we get the right person who will be responsive to the community as well as to perform the identified tasks. So in March of this year, I organized a council coordinating committee for the purpose of coordinating the office of all the elected officials, including the city auditor. We are all partners in making sure that the settlement is the items in the settlement are accomplished and that we improve trust with our community. So that's why we're here today to discuss how we're going to hire the compliance officer community liaison who will independently examine and synthesize the data for the purposes of reporting to the City Council, the United States Department of Justice, and the public on the city's compliance with the agreement. The Compliance Officer Community Liaison, sometimes known as the COCL, which I think is an unfortunate acronym, but there we are, will create and chair the Community Oversight Advisory Board, known as the COAB, also not particularly helpful, and hold public meetings. The COCOL is responsible for collecting, reviewing, reporting on data related to the Portland Police Bureau's interactions with persons experiencing a mental health crisis, use of force, Portland Police Bureau supervision, and management of force and training. The agreement requires that the top 3 finalists for this position will be publicly announced and for the community to have the opportunity to provide public testimony on those candidates. Then the person chosen will be selected by the City Council following a public vetting process. We want to start this process by not by using a request for proposals, but rather this request for resumes or some alternative process, which I will be inviting community stakeholder groups to join with me. One of those identified groups is the Albina Ministerial Alliance that we had the agreement with 2 weeks ago. I've discussed this in concept with the leadership of the Albina Ministerial Alliance, and they felt comfortable moving forward with this proposal, even though we haven't absolutely fleshed out exactly how it's going to be done. It's, as I said, important to get things done in a step-by-step manner. To do that, we have to do it in a public forum rather than behind the scenes, and so that's what we're doing today. And so we will be hopefully adopting the solicitation requirements, waiving the solicitation requirements of City Code 5.68 and having an alternative selection process. And just to give an example, Mayor Adams and now Mayor Hales are using this alternative request for proposals to review for rebidding the contract on the police psychological evaluation. And from what I've heard, that alternative process has resulted in much more community confidence, as well as Mayor Hale said, in increasing the diversity and scope of folks who felt that they wanted to apply. Sometimes, I know this will come as a shock to the viewing public, but sometimes our city processes are a little difficult to navigate, and we're hoping that this alternative process will be a lot clearer as to encouraging people to apply. And then we'll have a selection process which will include community stakeholders to figure out which 3 candidates to put forward for the public vetting process. Does anybody on the council have a question about that?
Yes. So I guess I'm confused a little bit. The COCOL, the community compliance person, is not going to be a city employee, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and it could be a firm, I mean, as opposed to an individual. Is that also correct?
No, the settlement agreement says it's an individual. So it could be a person in a firm, but we would be contracting with a person, not with the company.
And then,
Paid for by the city, obviously, but not a direct employee. Right?
and so this alternative process that we're looking to adopt today is not without precedent. So
Correct.
you're just saying the mayor has used it for selecting the police psychologist?
Correct. And it's also recommended by Christine Moody, the Chief Procurement Officer, who also helped draft this ordinance.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner, I just want to be absolutely sure of that, because I've actually gotten conflicting answers to that question about whether it can be an individual or a firm.
The discussion that we had at the coordinating committee yesterday was that it will be an individual. As I said, Ellen Osnock's out of town this week, so we can clarify that. This process doesn't exclude that. But most of those who are familiar with the agreement believe that it is an individual rather than a company.
I also have to say that I'm deeply disappointed to hear that the proper pronunciation is COCOL, because I had thought that it was cockle and that was deliberate, with the goal being to have a process that leads to police reform that warms the cockles of our hearts. So I deeply regret that I've been mispronouncing
We
it.
try to supply you puns on a regular basis, Commissioner Novick, but this time maybe not. I think the fine point about an individual versus a firm is not just a fine point. I think in terms of accountability, that the community is going to want to know that's the person that we, the community, have been involved in selecting, that the city council on the light of day had a process, picked somebody, the buck stops there. And, having been part of a consulting firm and part of my career, there are times when a client, in this case it's going to be the city of Portland, says, we want that person. And we'll have the ability to do that if the selected individual is somebody who's part of a firm. But I think for everybody's sake, there shouldn't be any fuzziness about this responsibility. There ought to be a person who is in this role.
Another question. Another question, I guess. Will the selection process, I believe we have hiring preferences for veterans in our normal hiring process? Will those preferences for veterans and what other preferences, will those be applicable here?
Good question. I'm not sure.
I don't know the answer to that either, but I would assume so.
Maybe our city attorney could check that.
I guess are we voting on this today?
We're not voting on the specific process. We're just saying that we're waiving the standard process
Right.
and that we're going to figure out the new process and bring that to council along with, there'll be another step.
Yeah, we're waiving the standard procurement process, but we're not finishing every detail of the selection process. Because we're going into the alternative track, we have some flexibility.
So
I
it's
suspect
the
we-
intent, I guess it is intent to honor existing hiring preferences that exist or contracting preferences that exist in city procurement processes or city
Correct.
hiring
We
processes.
would be bound by that, what we're directing is that the city code 5.68 is waived and an alternative selection process such as a request for resumes will be used for determination.
But what criteria we apply to that, I think we have pretty broad flexibility since we're in the alternative track. So we could say, and I'm inclined to agree with you, that our policies that guide general procurement in terms of preferences for veterans and those kinds of policies will apply in this case as well. So we will probably have that option.
And again, the coordinating committee will continue to meet every 2 weeks. Unfortunately, nobody from your office was able to come yesterday, but that's one of the bodies that will be putting forward a proposal. Then we'll have a selection advisory committee from the community stakeholders to continue to advise to review what we're proposing and help with the selection process.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, council? And then I do believe we have folks signed up to testify on this. Carla?
We do. Mary has probably left, Mary Ng, and we have Joanne Hardesty and Dan Handelman.
Yes. Let's do that next, right after this. Yep, let's do it.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council members. For the record, I'm Joanne Hardesty, and today I'm here representing the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. And I want to start off by saying thank you very much to both Mayor Hales and Commissioner Fritz for understanding that this process has to be outside of what would normally be a traditional City of Portland procurement process. This position is so critical for the success of the reform that we're going to undertake based on a U.S. Department of Justice complaint and settlement agreement. And so this is a tiny piece. And I want to say I'm so proud of this City Council for continuing to move forward, even though there continues to be obstacles to getting anything accomplished as it relates to moving forward police reform efforts in the City of Portland.
You worked in the state legislature. You're familiar with obstacles.
I am
to progress.
definitely familiar with obstacles, but I've never had the kind of opposition that I've experienced in trying to reform our police department. But doesn't mean we're not going to do it. It just means it's going to be a hard thing to do. And since I have like about 30 seconds left, I also want to take this opportunity to thank Commissioner Novick. It's rare to have a politician publicly say, when I get more information, I actually make better decisions. Thank you very much for doing that. That's a model for politicians in this city. I appreciate that. And so we wholeheartedly support the proposal that's in front of you, and we look forward to working with all of you to make sure that we are putting the reforms in place that will outlive all of us, so that we have a city that actually works for all the people in it, regardless of race, ethnicity, age, disability, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Council. Mayor Hales, I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. I'm also a member of the steering committee of the AMA Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. And I just want to point out that the ordinance mentions, if you read it all the way through, that the AMA Coalition met with your office and with Commissioner Fritz's office. And we do thank you for putting the community into the process of reforming the police, because one of the big concerns we had at Portland Cop Watch for years when people said, let's bring in the DOJ, is losing local control of our police. And the more we can keep things within our city, within our community as we move forward, I think the better. And I'm very appreciative that the AMA Coalition and other community members will help draw up these defining documents for what this COCL will do. And I'm not even going to pronounce it as a word. Thanks. So, one of the things that is of concern is that what's written in the DOJ agreement, and as you know, the coalition has expressed concerns that it doesn't go far enough, that the COCL's job has some defined parameters in that document, but that doesn't mean it's limited to what's written in that document. So we could also make it so that that person can do more things than just what's written in there. I also just want to say that one of the biggest frustrations about that DOJ agreement document is that the COCL doesn't have standing in court. And there's nothing that we can do to change that, but I just want to make sure for the record that if something's written in as the things develop and the COCL gets that power, we want to make sure that that person is aware that they may be able to go to court and say, well, we don't think this is being followed properly or whatever. Because I think that's one of the things that would differ between this process and federal court-appointed monitors that they have in other cities. And finally, I guess the piece that Joanne was sort of making obscure reference to is that we still have outstanding issues with the Portland Police Association. I was the only person, other than city staff, literally other than city staff, that appeared at the PPA negotiation session last Thursday. The PPA didn't show up, and I'm not sure whether that's going to continue. I think it's great that, Mayor, you're making efforts to ensure that the public has access to these discussions because, there are public policy issues involved in the labor contracts as it stands, and the public pays the salaries of the police, and we have an interest in how that money is being spent. And I would like to say I did read the city attorney's opinion that you can't require that they be open meetings unless there's a decision-making body involved, and I understand that, and I think that it would be great if people from a decision-making body came to those negotiations, and then they would be open meetings. So thank you.
Thank you, Tan. Thanks very much. Great. Anyone else signed up on this item?
That's all who signed up.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Further council discussion? And then a roll call, please.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Novick?
I very much appreciate Commissioner Fritz's continuing work in this issue. Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you, and I appreciate the partnership with the council offices and my colleagues on the council and also with the auditor's office. It is something that we all take very seriously, and the partnership with the community, with the Albina Ministerial Alliance and others is a good start, and we need to expand and continue that, which I am excited to see. And we will be expediting this with all due speed and also with all due transparency and accountability. So thank you, Mayor, for your partnership on this. Aye.
Fish?
Thanks to the community leaders who've been working on this and to the mayor and Commissioner Fritz. Aye.
Hales?
The Department of Justice settlement predated my arrival and Commissioner Novick's arrival on this council, but it is sound policy, both in letter and spirit, and you have my commitment and the council's commitment that we're going to continue to go step by step into full compliance with this agreement, and this is a very important step. Aye. Now, I would like to move, because we have an item here of importance and the chief here as well, to Commissioner Saltzman's proposal, item 764. So I'd like to take that out of order and let the chief and others testify about that. So could you read 764, please, Carla?
Authorize application to the Federal Emergency Management Agency for a grant in the amount of $4,554,394 for the 2013 Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response Grant Program to fund 26 firefighter positions for 2 years.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Thank you, Mayor. As you can see, we have Portland Fire and Rescue Chief Aaron Jansen's here to provide a bit more information about this important grant application. But I just wanted to start out by providing some overall context. The budget deficit the City Council faced in this year's budget was the largest deficit I have dealt with in the 15 years that I've served on the City Council. We had to make some very difficult decisions, and unlike many other tough budgets that I've been through, we've had to actually make some cuts to our public safety bureaus. And that is something that's unfortunate. One result of that is the adopted budget required the layoff of 26 firefighters that were notified, I think 2 weeks ago, the layoffs would take effect on October 9th. Thankfully, we have the option before us to ask the Federal Emergency Management Agency to provide bridge funding for the next 2 years. In that time, hopefully, our economy will improve and get stronger than ever, and the City Council can reallocate ongoing general fund dollars to keep these 26 firefighter positions staffed and serving our community when the grant expires in 2 years. But that will be for another council to make the decision. And right now, we hope that FEMA sees the wisdom in providing us the important funding to keep these 26 firefighters working for the City of Portland. And with that, I'll turn it over to Fire and Rescue Chief Aaron Jansen.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a substitute ordinance that's been?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I need to move a substitute ordinance.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think basically the substitute just substitutes the fire and rescue chief to make the decision about how to allocate the money rather than the mayor.
Initially, yes, and then the mayor will sign the final
That's
application.
So just take a moment before you start the rest of your presentation and describe the difference between the substitute and the original ordinance. So that's,
The only difference is the strikeout. The application states that they would like a chief officer from the requesting organization, and then the final so they've replaced mayor with fire chief.
Right.
And then the final application will have your signature.
right.
And that's,
So approved.
that's reflected in the accompanying memo that has the strikeout language.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's how the grant requirement works. I have to sign them,
Correct.
but you get to, you're the named party. Okay.
Right, point of contact.
Right. Further council discussion of the amendment, then roll call to substitute the amended version for the council hearing.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Novick?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hales?
Aye. Chief.
Good morning, members of council. I've already been introduced, but for the record, Aaron Jansen's Fire Chief, Portland Fire and Rescue. I have with me Deborah Harrison, who is our Business Operations Supervisor. As Commissioner Saltzman stated, and everyone knows, this has been a tough budget. And we heard what members of council asked for, creative solutions to hard problems. Our management team developed a plan that creates efficiencies for the taxpayer through innovative approaches, that maintains critical emergency response capabilities at all our fire and rescue stations throughout the city, and also sustains the high level of service Portlanders expect of their fire bureau. Portland Fire and Rescue is trying a new apparatus called a Quint that will preserve our limited truck companies, but supports deployment of a fire attack line if needed in an emergency. We also reorganized some resources to higher demand areas to respond more equitably across the city. Because Portland Fire and Rescue is a critical part of the safety net, we introduced new rapid response vehicles, specifically for medical calls where they're needed, in Old Town and East Portland. Their RRVs also help improve the response reliability and response time of critical fire apparatus, with staffing needed for more complicated and critical emergencies. Despite all of these efficiencies and innovations, the tools we use, the apparatus we ride, and the stations we staff and we operate from are meaningless without our most important asset, and that's our highly trained firefighters. To that end, we're here today to request council to approve our application for the 2013 SAFER grant, Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response, offered through FEMA. The SAFER program was implemented in 2003. However, since it's designed solely for departments that need to either rehire firefighters already laid off, or have issued official layoff notices to, Portland Fire and Rescue did not previously qualify for this funding. Unfortunately, now we do. On July 30th, Portland Fire and Rescue issued layoff notices to firefighters, impacting 26 people with the potential to close 2 fire and rescue stations. We respectfully request from council the support to apply for this SAFER funding, which, if we receive, will total over $4.5 million and can be used for the sole purpose of paying salary and benefits for these 26 firefighters for the next 2 years. Some specifics of the grant requirements are copies of the formal layoff notices must be included with the application. There's no cost match requirement and no maintenance of effort as have been previously required in former years. and grantees must maintain the safer funded staffing as well as the staffing at the level that existed at the time of the award for the 2-year commitment of the funding. I'd like to take a minute just to thank Business Operations Supervisor Deborah Harrison, who with the help of Merrill Gonerman, our Deputy Chief of Special Operations, and firefighter Isaac McLennan, and others who wrote this very complicated grant application. And I'd like to thank you for considering this opportunity for Portland Fire and Rescue to apply for the grant. There's a lot riding on it, not only for the firefighters and their families that will be directly impacted, but to the people of Portland who count on the services Portland Fire and Rescue provides.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for the Bureau? All right, thank you both very much. Good work. And I know we have some folks signed up to testify.
We have one person, Alan Ferschweiler.
Morning, Alan.
For the record, Alan Ferschweiler, I'm president of the Portland Firefighters Association. Good morning. I just wanted to hit a couple extra points on that, and I think that discussion of our bridge funding and our 26 positions that we have, and I think that's one of the things that we're focusing on with the SAFER grant. I want to emphasize is that if we do not get this grant and we don't get bridge funding, we have to have further cuts to the fire service and to the stations that currently exist. And so the changes that happened on July 1st, those are there and those are there to stay for right now. But if on October 9th we don't get this grant or further bridge funding, we have to look for 2 company closures or 2 other fire stations that will need to be further closed at that time. But I wanted to kind of talk about what happened, especially in the past week. On July 30th, the Bureau, which they did a very good job in bringing in all 26 people that were available into the Fire Station 1 and talk to them about the layoff notice and actually give it to them in person. And thanks to Chief Jansen for allowing me to be a portion of that day. That weekend, when the grant came out and it said we are going to open it on July 30th, my one commitment to our members was to call each and every one of those 26 people personally and tell them that they have our support and that I think about them all the time. And I think through this past 8 months, if anything, I can tell you the thought of them and their families has weighed on me and our other union officers greatly. The last person, of course, his name is Steve, and he's one that I really think about a lot. He's the last person in seniority. 8 years as a Marine. He was a civil servant over in Seaside, and he left that position to come and work for a firefighter for the Citizens of Portland. He's got 3 kids. It would just be devastating to him and his family if he did actually have to have that layoff. And so, again, I just want to reemphasize, I understand you guys are in a difficult budget position. I think this is an opportunity to be able to prevent any of those layoffs. And a firefighter like Steve that worked for Seaside, decorated Marine, to be able to keep his employment status with you. So again, thank you for letting me to testify. I'd encourage a yes vote, answer any questions that you guys would have.
I guess I just have one question. And first, I want to thank you for your persistence on this issue. I know you've been talking to each of our offices, making sure we get this right and honor a commitment we made. Looking at the item before us, authorizing the application, the amount, the sequencing, are you satisfied that we're fulfilling a commitment that we made?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Other questions for Alan? Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
No one else signed up to testify? Then let's take a roll call.
Saltzman.
Well, thank you, President Ferschweiler, for your testimony and for putting a human face on this unfortunate situation where we have to lay off 26 firefighters. Thank you to those firefighters who are here today for all of your service to our city and its residents. And let's get this grant into FEMA. Aye.
Novick.
I very much hope that this application will be successful. I too want to thank our firefighters for all the work they do, both fighting fires and responding to medical emergencies. And let's cross our fingers. Thank you. Aye.
Fritz.
Thanks to Commissioners Saltzman, Chief Jansen, and Carol Boucher. And again, we all hope that we get this grant. Aye.
Fish.
We made a commitment that we would vigorously pursue this grant, and Alan has kept our feet to the fire. And today we're moving forward to honor that commitment. As someone that is It knows what it's like to have a firefighter come to your house and answer a call and provide world-class service. I am as committed as all my colleagues are to securing this grant and hoping to avert layoffs that none of us wish. Thank you, Dan, for bringing this forward, and the council fully supports your application. Aye.
Hales.
Well, we were hard-pressed by this budget, and a lot of hard choices were queued up for the five of us, and difficult things, including giving people layoff notices, were the results of those hard choices. It's very fortunate that in this case we have an exit door, and we're going to try our very best, and this partnership that you heard from here this morning is a good sign of our hopes for that process, to make sure we get to use that exit door, and that people who we value as part of our team and that provide great service to our community will still be with us, and that those layoff notices will just be a piece of paper, not a reality. I want to particularly compliment you, Alan, and the Portland Firefighters Association for working in great partnership with the Bureau and with us to get this application together, to make a strong case to the federal government that this is exactly the circumstances that the SAFER grant was intended for. Portland doesn't ask the federal government for help unless we really need it. This time we do, and if there's anything that I can do as the mayor of this city to augment the quality of this application with whatever persuasion I can apply to the federal government, I'll be happy to pick up the phone and help. Thank you all. We look forward to hearing a favorable response to this grant from FEMA soon. Aye. Thank you. Thanks, Commissioner. Okay. Next, let's go back to the regular agenda.
Item 759, amend a contract with LifeWorks Northwest in an amount not to exceed $200,000 and extend the term through June 30, 2015 to work with the Police Bureau Prostitution Coordination Team.
Good morning.
Mayor, Commissioners, good morning. I'm Mike Gallagher, one of the officers who work at the East Precinct Coordination Team. I'd first like to thank you for funding the services that work the human trafficking victims as well as the women trying to remove themselves from the life of prostitution.
I'm Kristen Lum, Program Coordinator with New Options for Women with LifeWorks Northwest. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
During the recent budget talks, there were questions asked regarding the operating expenses and success rate of LifeWorks' New Option for Women program, as well as the Sex Buyers Accountability and Diversion School, also known as the John School. Unfortunately, the answers to these success rate questions is not easy as telling you the number of women who have graduated from the program. We wanted you to know that the program is working and there is a noticeable decrease in the number of women working out on 82nd Avenue as well as Standing Boulevard who were involved in prostitution. To provide the answers to the questions, the Deputy District Attorney working at our office, Kelly Cloyd, Kristen, and myself worked together to come up with these reporting requirements that the LifeWorks Now program will provide on a quarterly basis. This information will be reported back to East Precinct's Prostitution Coordination Team and then will be shared with Commander Westbrook. The amendment, the LifeWorks reporting requirement, is in addition to the original contract we had in place for the 2012-2013 fiscal year. In coming up with this amendment, we looked at how we could best track the women involved in the program and provide information on how they were doing. Additionally, we included tracking information related to the John School participants as well as the money generated from that program. We also included information about the administrative costs associated with the NOW program. We believe this information will be invaluable in the future to answer questions about the LifeWorks New Option for Women program and demonstrate the importance of the work they're doing. Kristen and I are here to answer any questions you might have about the amendment and the New Options for Women program.
Great, thank you.
Could you?
So this data or these outcomes data will be reported to whom?
We reported to myself at the prostitution team, the team members on the team, with the commander at the precinct, and then be shared with the commissioners at their request.
And it's every 6 months the data is compiled?
Quarterly, then we'll have a summary every 6 months that will be available.
I'm certainly interested in seeing the data as it evolves.
Very much.
Could you clarify that our materials say this is funded with $100,000 one-time special appropriation and $100,000 Burn Memorial Justice? Is the $100,000 special appropriation in our most recently adopted budget, or are we taking it out of contingency?
My understanding is the most the recent budget.
Most recent.
So we adopt, that was in our budget.
Yes.
Other questions for our team here? Great.
I did want to say we heard you, and we have changed how we are keeping track of things, and we have made it much more clear to report back. So we heard everything you said, and we're really thankful for that feedback, and we're doing the best to show more clearly, just so you can see that we heard you, and now we know the process a little better, so we can be here and in the conversation the whole time. And we look forward to any questions you might have throughout the year. Please feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk more about it. So.
Good. Thank you. I appreciate you being responsive. Thanks. Other questions?
Oh, I forgot. Since I last saw all of you, we've had 5 women graduate the New Options for Women program. So completely abstinent from drug and alcohol use and exit from the lifestyle with gainful employment or educational schooling plan. So that's a pretty big yay.
That's a big yay.
Yeah.
It's in the last 4 months or so.
Yeah,
then,
since I think 2 were in the end of the last fiscal year, but 3 have been in this fiscal year already. So
That's great.
just an update.
Thank you. All right, other questions? And is there anyone else signed up on this?
Yes, we have Joe Walsh.
Come on up, Mr. Walsh.
My name is Joe Walsh. I represent Individuals for Justice, and we're here to fully support the reintroduction of the monies for this program. It's a national problem, but the underage prostitution is so odious that I was excited about the work that Commissioner Fritz did on this, and also the mayor being involved, and also for the second time in 2 weeks complimenting the police department. We are in fully support of this, and we just thank you for fighting to get this money back. I used to live very close to 82nd Street, and I know the area reasonably well. So it's something that has to be addressed. It's something that, as human beings, we really need to stop it. So thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. Anyone else signed up?
That's all who signed up.
Okay, then let's take a roll call, please.
Saltzman?
Well, I want to thank the council for approving the funding for the New Options for Women program in the recent budget process. LifeWorks has been one of our partners from the beginning of the city's efforts to combat human trafficking. As was pointed out, this contract is great because it does have new data reporting requirements, which coincides in a great way with Portland State University's study that was released on Monday with hard data about child trafficking in Portland. Quantifiable, factual information will shed light on this hidden topic. So thank you to LifeWorks and to the East Precinct Prostitution Coordination Team, and thanks in particular to Officer Mike Gallagher for his steadfast commitment to ending prostitution. Thank you. Aye.
Novik?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the good news about your recent successes. Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you for your participation in the budget process. It must be noted that this contract is $47,000 less than last year's. And so, as the mayor graciously agreed when I voted for the budget, we will be looking at what additional services we can provide to both adults and children escaping prostitution. So I invite both of you to contact my office because we need to get going on that now that I've got a little bit of a handle on my new bureaus. That's certainly very close to the top of my to-do list. So if you can be thinking about who else should be engaged in that discussion, I agree that the reporting requirements is going to be helpful. We do need to be able to show that we're investing the public's money wisely and making improvements. Just coming today and saying that we have 5 survivors who are now on the beyond the road to recovery. They're there. So thank you both for your work. And I know that each one of those people has a story and that each one of you was a part of that recovery. So thank you very much. Aye.
Fish.
And Mayor, I recently attended the groundbreaking for LifeWorks Northwest's new residential facility in Inner Northeast, and I met a number of the women and their children who are in recovery that will call that new facility home. That is funded in part through the Portland Housing Bureau and with the use of urban renewal money, and they, on their third try in a competitive process, secured funding to make this a reality. If you visited the existing facility up beyond Widmer Brewing, you know why it is so vitally important that we have a modern facility for their clients. And in addition to the work they do in addressing and combating prostitution, they do such wonderful work with women in recovery. So thank you for your great work in our community. I'm proud to vote aye.
Hales.
You know, we have to make our decisions up here with our hearts and our heads. So you're giving us the ability to do that here by both highlighting really outrageous crime and the need to be serious about fighting it, and giving us quantifiable justification for how we spend the public's money. Those are two reasonable things to make decisions on, and you're giving us the tools to do that and to do very important work, and I appreciate that work that you're doing. Thank you. Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Okay. 759, nope, 780, 760, sorry.
760, accept and appropriate a grant in the amount of $20,000 from the Oregon Department of Transportation, Transportation Safety Division 2013 Portland Police Speed Grant for sworn personnel overtime.
Good morning.
Morning. I am Lieutenant Chris Davis with the Portland Police Traffic Division, and we're here today to ask for you to accept this grant. This covers the rest of the federal fiscal year, so it's $20,000 to be used for speed enforcement overtime between now and the end of September, and then we'll be able to reapply, presumably for a larger grant for next federal fiscal year. And we all know that there has been an uptick in traffic fatalities in Portland in 2013, and one of the common factors in traffic fatalities is speed. We recently lost 5 positions in the traffic division in the budget crisis, and so this grant will enhance our ability to conduct speed enforcement missions in high crash corridors. And these are multi-officer missions, and we can also use this as a force multiplier for the ongoing projects we have with the state police and the sheriff's office to do enhanced traffic safety enforcement in Portland. So we would ask for your support for this today.
Great, thank you. Lieutenant, questions?
Could you remind us what are the high traffic, high crash corridors, I guess?
There are several throughout the city, and there are areas that have been identified as having above average traffic crash rates. Southeast Division Street is one example of a high crash corridor.
Southeast Powell.
Powell is actually a high crash corridor for the city, and it's one of the highest crash locations on state facilities in Oregon.
Thanks.
Other questions, Lieutenant Davis? Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else that's testifying on this?
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank Lieutenant Davis for the work the Traffic Division has done, where we've had street closures and major arterials this summer, and we've asked the Traffic Division to go in and over-patrol and make sure that people aren't speeding through neighborhoods when they take detours. And you've issued a lot of citations and really helped to make sure that those closures haven't resulted in the adjoining neighborhoods being unsafe. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
My understanding is that the grant period, that when the overtime has to be done, ends by September 30th.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think the public should be aware that you will have a lot of patrols out between now and then.
Yes, we will.
They're warned, and we hope they don't need the warning, but we're glad you're out there.
Thank you.
Thanks. Other questions for Lieutenant Davis? Anyone else signed up?
Yes, we have 3 people. Please come on up. Are Mary Eng, Ben Pickering, and Joseph Gordot.
Okay, Mary, on this topic, please.
Okay.
Police brutality?
On this, no, has nothing to do with police brutality, it has to do with traffic enforcement.
Thank you, Council. This is Mary Eng. I just wanted to clarify if I understood this resolution to be a measure towards increasing traffic safety by offering police overtime.
paying for overtime
Paying
so they
for
can be out
overtime.
there longer.
And what is the permissible, allowable overtime that officers are allowed to have, and what kind of risk assessment is done for accidents that happen after a certain threshold is reached in terms of increased safety due to overwork or overstress or possible missing of meals or breaks?
We can probably get you answers to those questions, but I'd ask you to talk to Lieutenant Davis after the council meeting.
Lieutenant Davis?
Right behind you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Anything else? Right.
Oh, yeah. What do the people get paid that call in accidents or people on the road or whatnot? I mean, who actually drives around that's got nothing better to do, whether it's, I mean, I know friends and everybody, and daddy's got friends, but people that drive nice trucks just like to drive around because they ain't got nothing better to do. Residential, around a corner, down southeast, northeast, wherever. But I mean, what do they get a little pension for like their time just to drive around, even though they're not wearing a badge or nothing? But I mean, would it be cool to be brought up to have something just throw out there if someone's got a little bit of free time out there just driving around just to enjoy their day, whatever, in the neighborhood, like they say, is, do you think it'd be, what does that cost?
Okay, thanks for coming. We'll get you answers outside of the hearing, okay? Thanks. Anyone else?
That's all.
Okay, council vote.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Novick?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hales?
Yeah, the police chief, with good cause, celebrated the accomplishments of the Bureau and the community in reducing Part 1 crime from last year to this year by about 9%. That's great news, but as Lieutenant Davis pointed out, we're having a bad year for traffic safety, and enforcement really matters. Engineering matters, education matters, but so does enforcement. And it's really been appalling to see, as I do the daily situation reports coming from the Police Bureau, with pedestrian collision after bicycle collision after accident with injuries or fatalities. So this traffic enforcement work is really important, and the presence on the street has both a suppressing effect on accidents that therefore don't happen, and apprehends people who are causing problems out there. So, boy, we're getting, unfortunately, way too many reminders this year in appalling statistics about loss of life and serious injury that traffic safety matters. So we appreciate the good work you're doing.
Yield on one point. I live in the Grant Park neighborhood, and I would actually have some friendly advice for people who are on bikes and in cars. That sign that's in red that says stop at the intersection, if people actually stopped, I've now noticed that it is now equal opportunity.
Yeah.
The bikes don't stop, the cars don't stop. The only difference is the cars can do more damage than a bike. But I don't know that we've amended our laws to say that those are just cautionary signs. I believe they still require a complete stop, and I would think that's a surprise to a lot of people in my neighborhood.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually have been looking at the statistics as they come through, and there's a little bit of a pattern which you might lump a lot of these injuries and fatalities into behavior that I would somewhat flippantly call being clueless in the right-of-way, whether you're driving a car while texting, walking across the street, texting, riding a bike without a helmet diagonally across an intersection. There are lots of ways to get hurt or killed by operating casually in a dangerous environment, which is what these folks have done. And then the other biggest factor, by far, is alcohol. And so traffic enforcement does a very good job when they're out there of apprehending people that are driving under the influence.
I could also just note, Mayor, that we know lots of people, including members of this council, who've lost loved ones in car accidents. It is something that you never recover from. And in addition, I know people who have been behind the wheel and have, through an accident, taken a life. And it's something they have never recovered for. And I think if people, in their rush and in their selfishness, took a moment to think that ultimately the cost of this reckless behavior could be a life, and an innocent life, particularly in a residential area, we might see a higher degree of responsible driving and cycling, because I believe it's now an equal opportunity offense.
You're here. Thank you very much. Aye. Thanks. Okay, next item, Carla.
761, amend an intergovernmental agreement with the Multnomah County District Attorney to reimburse the Police Bureau for overtime cost up to $31,995 of officers assigned to the District Attorney's Office as investigators.
Great, thank you. Do you want to read the other item too, since are you doing both of these?
I think I'm only doing one.
Okay, go ahead.
regarding the DAs.
Sorry.
I hope.
The other ones.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Margaret Bonson. I'm a sergeant with the Portland Police Bureau in the Detective Division. The Portland Police Bureau has provided 3 officers to perform investigations for the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office. These investigations are directly and indirectly related to the prosecution of crimes within Multnomah County. The City and Multnomah County District Attorney's Office have an agreement stating the City of Portland will be reimbursed for overtime incurred for these investigations up to $31,994. The Police Bureau is asking that you accept this ordinance for reimbursement of the overtime funds for the 2014 fiscal year.
Thanks, appreciate that. Questions? Anyone signed up?
Yes, we have Mary Eng and Ben Pickering.
You have the authority to say.
Yeah, not again, Mary. Mary, this is on only this item. Okay.
We had to resolve a security issue outside,
No, please go resolve it outside.
but I'm allowed to speak on the measure for which I spoke?
Only on this item.
And the item, since I was outside, could I?
It's reimbursing us from Multnomah County for police investigations.
Okay.
It's
And
only
how
on-
long am I permitted to speak, Mr. Hales?
3 minutes on
3
this
minutes.
subject.
Okay. So reimbursements for the City of Portland for investigations from Multnomah County, which I've heard Multnomah County has more money than the city, and the city's been having some anxiety about finances. And so the reimbursement protocol, and actually, I would like to have a copy of this in writing. Is that possible?
Yes, we can get you a copy.
Okay, that would be nice. And this is for police investigations with the Joint Terrorism Task Force?
No, nothing to do with
Just
that.
common petty crime? Yes. Okay. And then, how do we deal with crimes upon citizens that are instigated by police officers?
That's not the subject before us.
That's not the subject before us? Okay.
Thanks very much.
I just want to, before I get started, I know what this is about, but just one thing I don't know. I got 3 minutes. Okay. Is this for either? I mean, I don't take sides because I give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but this is for a petty crime or police brutality, kind of in a way, like either fighting for either side.
This is just the county reimbursing the police bureau for overtime when we're investigating. Yeah.
For investigating. Well, for the right reasons, I have nothing to say. Let's
Okay.
go.
Thanks very much. Anyone else? Carla, anyone else?
No,
Okay.
That's all who signed up.
Roll call, please.
Saltzman,
Aye.
Novick,
Aye.
Fritz,
Aye.
Fish,
Aye.
Hales.
Aye. 762.
Amend an intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County District Attorney to increase funding in the amount of $3,058 for child abuse investigations.
Come on up. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Andrew. I am the acting captain at Family Services Division. This amendment is merely a clerical error that the county performed when they were giving the amount back to the city. So it's an add of $3,058.
Okay, great. Thank you. Questions?
Captain Andrew, that was the most succinct and persuasive testimony we've had today. Thank you.
Brevity is our friend.
Thank you. It is no wonder you are rising so rapidly through the ranks.
Thank you very much. Anyone signed up?
Mary Eng and Ben Pickering.
Oh, Mary, come on. No.
You have the right to say no.
Mary, I'm not going to allow you to continue to testify.
But I'm a citizen. I don't see
No,
why I
this is-
get special rules where my free speech is violated.
Because we have 600,000 citizens in the city, and
Well, let's get them to come to the meetings.
that would be a good idea, but you have to give them room. So I'm going to rule that we're not going to take any more testimony on this, and we're going to go ahead and approve it. It's a clerical error, Mary.
Can the other commissioners verify that the mayor is not acting out of order in trying to suppress citizen testimony
I
on
will
child abuse?
move to call the question.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, let's vote.
Question's been called. Let's have a roll call.
Saltzman,
Aye.
Novick,
I too appreciate your succinct testimony. I think we're all wondering why we were voting on $3,058. Aye.
Fritz?
We're voting on the original question.
Yeah.
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hales?
Aye. Okay, 763.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioners. Thank you, Mayor.
We need to do the roll call on 762 first.
That was my question. I didn't.
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
We were,
Call the question.
That was the amendment. Okay, now roll call on the original question. I'm sorry, I didn't understand you, Commissioner. Yes.
On the, okay. Is that first roll call, was that on the motion or?
that was on the, apparently on the.
Call a question.
On the motion, sorry.
you.
Now it's
And
on
now
the
it's-
amendment itself.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Novick?
Aye.
Fritz?
So for the record, I would not have voted yes on the motion to call the question, but I do vote yes on this. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hales?
Aye. 763.
Authorize an intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County to reimburse Police Bureau overtime costs up to $15,000 for education and enforcement efforts to reduce alcohol service to visibly intoxicated persons and service to minors at Portland bars and nightclubs.
Good morning, thank you.
Morning. Thanks for having us. My name is Officer Ariana Ridgely. I work for Central Precinct Entertainment Detail. And today we came to bring about an intergovernmental agreement. This is Sandra Storm. She's from the county. They had a federal grant to reduce high-risk drinking among young people, 18-25. And she asked if we had any ideas on how to do that. Working in the entertainment detail, we see a lot of over-service, which often leads to a variety of problems later down the road, including the traffic accidents that we just discussed.
Can I just ask you,
Yes.
just to define, what does over-service mean?
Means serving someone too much alcohol.
And I'm just curious, if a bartender under Oregon law knows that someone is inebriated and keeps serving that customer, do we attach any liability on the bartender or the owner?
Yes, the bartender, it's a misdemeanor to do so.
It's a misdemeanor?
Correct.
And if that customer who's inebriated leaves the bar and they observe the person inebriated, gets in a car, I know in some states they attach liability to the owner of the bar for the subsequent accident. Do we have a similar law in Oregon?
I believe the OLCC can fine them for things like that. Generally, they sue them civilly.
But I know that just my sense is in other states, they've passed statutes that say if a bartender serves someone who's inebriated, knows they're getting in a car, and there's a subsequent accident, that is considered a foreseeable event, and they are liable in the chain for whatever happens.
I don't think Oregon has that.
But our authority
That would
then
be
is to ding the owner or the bartender for a misdemeanor offense if they are serving someone who's clearly inebriated and they what you
Correct.
say is over-serve.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So our idea, unfortunately in Oregon, in order to actually go forward with that ORS, you have to see them do it. You have to get the actual bartender. You can't charge the bar with it. So it has to be the person who served them last. So that can be kind of difficult, especially for uniformed officers, to see. We don't spend a lot of time directly inside the bars, at the bar, watching people get drinks. So this grant from the county would allow overtime costs for backfill to plainclothes officers to go into establishments and observe servers to see if we are seeing any of this over-service. And if we see it, then we will cite the server. And our hope initially is that they will have an option to take some kind of over-service education class to dismiss the ticket on the first offense.
Did you say 2 plainclothes officers?
Yes.
Okay.
For safety.
Yeah.
Go in by ourselves.
I get it.
All of these missions will be documented in reports. Tickets will be sent to the DA's office. We're working with one of our neighborhood DAs on getting those prosecuted and working with community court to get a class set up so that, like the seatbelt class does with traffic tickets, they could take that instead. And we'll be reporting back to the county on how the money is spent.
Great, thank you.
Question. Does the Oregon Liquor Control Commission still have sort of undercover people working also?
They do, and we are going to hopefully have one or two with us on each one of these missions. We're working with them because they have a different site where they can site the establishment and not just the server. So we're trying to work together jointly to do that.
Are they looking at both underage drinking and over-serving?
Correct.
And how egregious does the violation have to be, or how many repeat violations until you can actually take some more dramatic action against the operator?
The owner of the bar?
Shut them down or take,
From OLCC standpoint, I don't know how they do that. If we saw those, from the city standpoint, we can use that to some degree in a time, place, manner violation for the establishment later through the liquor licensing committee. It generally has to be the way the laws, and it's they should have known. The person is visibly intoxicated. It's very obvious that they are intoxicated and should not have any more alcohol. And you just have to articulate it, what you're seeing.
If I don't want to give away too much here, but I'm a cable TV junkie, and there's a couple of these undercover restaurant shows that are big hits now, and not infrequently one of the problems is a bartender over-serving, someone struggling, staggering out, getting into a car, and that's what often sends the owner who's watching and hidden camera over the top, and it actually happens quite a bit in those shows. So I think going upstream and trying to prevent this so that people don't leave these establishments and get in their car and become essentially a weapon is vitally important.
That's the idea. Welcome. Want to add anything?
No, I mean, just thank you for listening to this. And so I coordinate the project. It's called the Strategic Prevention Framework State Incentive Grant Project.
Put your name into the record.
Yes, my name is Sandra Storman. I'm with Multnomah County Mental Health and Addiction Services, and I'm coordinating this grant project to reduce high-risk drinking. And I just wanted to mention that with the project, we are looking at multiple strategies. We're working with the colleges in Multnomah County, as well as a task force that's focused on the entertainment district, because that is where a lot of the young adults go to drink. And the Portland Police, as well as the City of Portland Office of Neighborhood Involvement, have been very involved and very helpful in thinking about creative strategies to address this issue. So we are looking at multiple strategies. Enforcement is definitely a research-based strategy around addressing some of these issues, but we're also looking at policy, looking at the norms and kind of messaging in the district, as well as the direct work with college students. So,
Can I ask you about that point? Because I have a rising college junior in my household, and so my sense is that most college students in Oregon are not legally allowed to buy and consume alcohol until at least their junior year, generally.
Right.
And yet, my own personal experience as a former college student is that that the enforcement on the campus is not as vigorous as it could be. Do colleges, is it your experience that our local colleges and universities are trying to get the word out that students are not allowed to consume alcohol if they're underage off campus? Do they have programs in place around that?
Yeah, well, so there's 6 colleges that we're working with on our task force, and so each of those schools are unique. Portland State, the environment at PSU is different than the environment at Reed or at Lewis and Clark. So I would say on campus, there are varying degrees of infrastructure established to address some of the drinking issues and different cultures, different philosophies. But there are 6 schools that are working with us that are trying to strengthen those resources that they have and strengthen the policies that they have. So I would say it varies a lot depending on the school, what their actual practices are and the resources that they have to address those. But it is definitely an issue that all of the campuses are aware of and are trying and are working to try to address. With PSU being the largest university, in Oregon, the average age for a student at PSU is actually 26. But as it has increased in size, the traditional students have increased as well, and there's more student housing. And so they're really trying to ramp up efforts to address some of the on-campus housing issues. And then, of course, being in the city, there's much more of there's an intersection between urban issues and city issues as well as student issues. So
Appreciate that point, because my wife teaches at PSU, and she reminds me it's a continuum of learning. So people come back at different stages, the way we see in community colleges, whereas you might see at Reed more students that are in the sort of traditional ages for college, whereas at PSU people are coming back and continuing their education maybe on a less structured basis. So thank you for that.
So part of the work that we're doing is focused in residence life, so catching those students that are living on campus at PSU, and we're doing some concentrated work with residence life around campaigns and enforcement and policy and all that. So.
Thank you. Good morning. Want to add anything?
Morning. Jay Gahan, Portland Police. Just the one thing I'd like to add to what Officer Ridgely stated is that although this will be performed in bars and establishments where people are supposed to be 21, it's going to help us get a handle on the underage drinking problem with the times that we're in now. Underage people have a great resource of getting IDs that show that they're 21 from overseas, and they get a lot of that stuff that the bars have trouble detecting. So this will help us not only stop the over-service, but also enforce against the people using the fake IDs.
Good. Thank you.
So they're getting fake driver's licenses by overseas?
Yes.
Okay.
China is one of the worst, I guess, countries that has these companies that they don't really take any enforcement again. They actually get 2-for-1 deals when they purchase their IDs. In case the first one gets confiscated, they have a backup that they can use another time.
Wow. Great. Other questions for the team? Thank you. Anyone signed up?
Just Mary and Ben.
Mary? It's got to be on this topic.
I would move to call the question again.
Okay.
Could I get a clarification from the city attorney on people being allowed to testify?
The mayor has the authority, if he finds that the testimony is creating a disruption in the council meeting, to limit public testimony. That's the standard, whether it's creating a disruption.
And there's precedent on that. Mayor Adams, on situations where people came on every single item and in particular did not address the item, Mayor Adams invoked that clause. And one of the reasons he did is that there are lots of other people that are inconvenienced when people testify not on the subject matter and for the purpose of just filibustering. And the mayor does have, under Robert's rules, the right to maintain good order.
Thanks. And I intend to use that again. If you want to testify on this subject, you get to do that. But if you get to come up here again and again and again and talk about what you want to talk about, that's not what this forum's for. It's 763.
Hi, members of the council. My name is Mary Eng. I would like to heartily congratulate you on your support for 763, a measure to authorize an intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County to reimburse the Police Bureau overtime costs of up to $15,000 for education and enforcement efforts to reduce alcohol service to visibly intoxicated persons and service to minors at Portland bars and nightclubs. I'd like to encourage you to consider the risks of continued use or abuse of overtime as a measure when we have a staffing crisis and cutbacks on a lot of emergency services, police and firemen, et cetera. But I would like to support the measure because of the severe sadness and sorrow deaths via DUI and intoxicated drivers cause. And I think with young people, especially the Generation Y, is in an extreme crisis financially. A lot of us have been unemployed, Gen X and Gen Y. So the turning to alcohol as a means to satisfy the internal economic and social struggle we face is definitely something that we should find better ways to encourage a productive and happy and harmonious community. So this will be a first step, and I would like to also laud the state of Oregon for their progressive measures in alcohol enforcement in terms of the famous case regarding death by a drunk driver, and that in some ways Oregon seems to have a tendency to be a bit of a controlling in terms of our social crimes, but I think some measures to protect the community and especially at-risk minors or juveniles may help prevent some of these unfortunate occurrences of death and rape which are happening, or abuse of the homeless at-risk juvenile population as well. So trying to get some curtailment of that, which is often used in the human trafficking and child trafficking phenomenon, which is so relentlessly pursued by Amanda Marshall. That's something we can all be proud of here in Portland, Oregon, as we attempt to help the at-risk children. Thank you.
Thank you. Morning.
Hi, for the alcohol thing, I agree on what she said, but to take it attention, or take it, take it in, and we talked about this just the other day on TV. I mean, I've experienced this stuff. I see it on the streets and stuff. It's kind of like one of those things. Came here and said something about the crime going up. I mean, the alcohol, there should be a limit on, understanding, there should be, it should be a private place if you're old enough with ID, and each person should have a limit to what they buy, because some people go into stores, I see it all the time, in and out of trafficking stores and different stuff, where kids go up to a certain amount of people. I've heard it, I've seen it, they've even come up to me and asked me about it. Well, I can just go down the street and get it from a guy or gal that's old enough that will buy it for me. Not a big deal. I'm like, well, and the violence is just like, some of the people are either upset or this and that. Some of the people, are just scrounging up money. I mean, but to be abusive with it, like, scrounging up just to get that alcohol, that drink, well, sometimes, it's like I see people, having a hard day at work. I've hung around with my daddy and hit some of his friends, on some of my friends' dads and parents, they work, go out and you bust a sweat. I've helped my mom and dad in the garden or whatever, and, I'm of age to drink, and, and I don't gorge myself, but one cools me off, and the breeze picks up, and it cools me off just fine. But I mean, taking advantage of the deal, socializing, drinking some wine and whatever, that's cool. But it's like one of those things that's going up. It's like there should be a limit on, what it is anyway. And being a moral support, I think the best thing for a few things. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay. Anyone else?
That's all.
Roll call.
Saltzman,
Aye.
Novick,
Aye.
Fritz.
I very much appreciate the team's work on this. I was at the Downtown Neighborhood Association's National Night Out party last night. I was talking to Mike Boyer, the Office of Neighborhood Involvement's Crime Prevention Specialist for downtown, hearing about the remarkable work of the Police Bureau, partnering with the Mayor's Office and our attention to the so-called entertainment district and the issues that you're facing. So it's also a great example of our partnership with the county and recognizing this is our problem. And it does highlight some of the challenges we have with the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. Of all the things I lost in only going over to you, that the battles with the OLCC are not one of those that I am missing in any way, shape, or form. But thank you, Mayor, for your leadership on this, and again to the team for your coming and for working on this problem. Aye.
Fish.
I would also like to thank the panel that came before us today for an excellent and thorough and thoughtful presentation. It was good to hear about this work, and this seems like a fairly modest investment with the potential for a big community impact. So thank you. Aye.
Hales.
We're right on the ragged edge in Old Town between a safe and successful entertainment district and the Wild West. And we all know which side of that line we want to be on. And in fact, I don't have much patience with those that want to drag us over the line into the Wild West, whether that's individuals who are trying to buy alcohol who aren't legally permitted to do so, bars that are serving it to them, or people that are unmindful of the fact that they have neighbors that would like to get a good night's sleep. I think we can make this work, but it is going to require cooperation of the community and the kind of cooperation that we see here with this panel in Multnomah County working effectively with the Police Bureau. You mentioned the OLCC. You're not done with those issues, Commissioner Fritz, and you know that because I want us to start thinking soon about our legislative agenda for next session. And the fact that we've had this experience with what's working and what's not working in terms of the OLCC's regulations. Seen some real success in terms of the OLCC's work on last Thursday. They were out there last Thursday and did a great job. And we also see this carnage of too many people operating motor vehicles under the influence of alcohol. So we have a lot to talk about with the OLCC in terms of our authority to keep it on the right side of that line between a safe and successful entertainment area and the Wild West, and we want them to be our partners too. So this is good work. I appreciate the partnership and look forward to continuing it. Thank you. Aye. Okay. We are to 765.
Vacate portions of Southeast Sherritt Street and Southeast Umatilla Street west of Southeast Grand Avenue, subject to certain conditions and reservations.
Good morning. It is still morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. John Deo with the City of Portland Right-of-Way Acquisition. Before you is the proposed vacation of portions of Sherritt and Umatilla Streets west of Southeast Grand Avenue. This street vacation was initiated by the Bureau of Environmental Services pursuant to a stipulated general judgment from 2010. And this judgment was in connection with negotiations between the city and Portland Rowing Club for the granting of easements on their property needed for the Selwood CSO pump station project. This item has been before the Planning and Sustainability Commission and was approved. And with me today to answer any questions you might have is Bill Ryan from the Bureau of Environmental Services.
Right. Okay. Good. Thank you. Questions? Concerns from the council? Okay. Anyone signed up?
Yes, we have Mary Eng, Sarah Gardner, and Corey Tolliver.
Okay, Mary, this is on a street vacation, so I assume you don't have any testimony on that? All right, come on up, please, ma'am.
I'm Sarah Gardner, the president of the Waverly Landing Condominium Homeowners Association, and we are supposed to receive half of the Sherritt Street vacation, which comes directly up to our building, and we just want to say that we very much appreciate this, the opportunity to have the land, to give us a little bit of buffer, and we accept.
I'm glad we could get it worked out. Thank you.
I hope we have.
I think we have now.
So just, excuse me, on that point, my understanding is that we were retaining both a pedestrian easement and a sewer easement over the entire property. Is that your understanding also?
That's our understanding, and we also understand that this is to be determined after there's also a pedestrian path along the river, which is currently not enforced across the rowing club's property. It is across ours. And we understand that that walking path right of way down the vacation cannot be put into place until the other walkway across the rowing club's property is in effect.
Okay,
but we
thank you.
do understand that.
Well, I'd like to get clarification from staff on that point, so thank you for saying that.
Want to come back up and clarify that
Was there
question?
another person? Was there somebody else signed up?
There was a Corey Tolliver.
Oh, I'm sorry. Come on up if you'd like.
Come on up.
Sorry, I didn't mean to exclude you.
My name is Corey Tolliver with Laughlin Full-On Alterman Richardson. I represent the Portland Rowing Club, which joins both of the street vacations. And I'd just like to say that the Rowing Club obviously supports the application, understands the public easements and utility easements across the two pieces of property, and would like to thank the Commission for its work on this. It's been a long process over the last couple of years to get the Selwood pump station in place and to bring the stipulated judgment, kind of work it out, which was the agreement between the Rowing Club and the City of Portland. And I can address any objections that the council has, but other than that, I think you can probably talk to the Commission.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. And questions for staff? Yes.
Yes, any questions you have concerning?
I'd like to know more about the pedestrian easement, both down the vacated right-of-way and parallel to the river.
Okay, there will be a pedestrian easement reserved over the portion of Sherritt to be vacated. There is currently not an easement for a pedestrian trail across the rowing club property. there is over the Waverly Landing condominiums portion. So this easement for the trail would connect up to the Springwater Corridor Trail and provide a connection down to the Greenway Trail along the river.
So was there any discussion of asking for an easement across the rowing club property?
There was discussion before Planning Commission and amongst staff, but at this point, it was decided at the point that the rowing club came in for permits to develop their land. At that time, we would get an easement for the Greenway Trail.
Is there a condition of approval on that for the street vacation?
There's not a condition of approval from the Planning Commission for the Greenway Trail on the rowing club's property.
So this is a non-emergency ordinance. I'd like some discussion on that before the vote, because it seems like we're giving the right-of-way going down to the river to the adjacent properties. It would be appropriate, in my opinion, to get an easement across the properties similar to what's on the Waverly condominiums in order to be able to complete the Greenway Trail, which is, after all, a state regulation.
Right.
So if we could have some discussion about that, I'd appreciate it.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good. Other questions? And if not, then I believe this passes to second reading, right? Yes, passes to second reading. Get a chance to answer those questions before it comes back for second reading. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, 766.
Amend contract with Portland Streetcar, Inc. to provide additional project management and other professional services for the Portland Streetcar Loop project and increase compensation by $157,500.
Good morning.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, by way of introduction, both this and our next item do relate to the streetcar loop project, and both of them are involve allocating additional money. And as Catherine will explain, the money would come out of contingency funds. We're not adding additional dollars to the project. However, the purpose of the contingency is not, of course, to spend all of it. You hope you don't. And these expenses are related to some of our ongoing issues with the timely receipt of consistently functioning streetcars from Oregon Iron Works, United Streetcar, Inc. And I'd like to just take a moment to talk about our relationship with Oregon Iron Works, United Streetcar, Inc. I mean, there's a huge value in doing business with an Oregon company. They are planning to sell streetcars not just to us, but around the country. And if they're successful in building a thriving business, that's a huge benefit to us, because although they're not in Portland, they're in the state. They and their employees, and they provide living wage jobs, pay state income taxes, which support our schools. The company pays property taxes, which for the most part, I mean, the schools part of it goes into the statewide pool that supports everybody's schools. And there is a value, I think, in dealing with a local company. I met with the president of United Streetcar, Inc. last week, Kevin Carter, and found out that he too went to Young College Junior High School. And it's nice to have that kind of personal connection. And it's also understandable that you've got a company that's going into a new line of business. There are going to be some glitches. And we've had some glitches with companies that weren't Oregon companies. My understanding is that the Czech Republic company that was delivering streetcars to us some years ago, we had some delays there too. But the fact that glitches and delays are understandable doesn't make them acceptable. And when I met with Mr. Carter last week, he said the delays we've been having are unacceptable and need to be fixed. And we've made it clear to Oregon Iron Works, United Streetcar, Inc., that when we settle accounts at the end of the contract, we expect to be made whole for damages due to delays. They understand that. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Catherine to describe specifically what these amendments are about.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Levine. I'm with Portland Transportation. And as the commissioner noted, both of the items, I'd like to talk about both 766 and 767.
We'll get Carla to read the second item.
767, amend contract with Portland Streetcar, Inc. for vehicle engineering services related to streetcar vehicles being procured from Oregon Iron Works for the Portland Streetcar Loop project and increase compensation by $175,860.
Thank you. Both of these are contract amendments with Portland Streetcar, Inc., the nonprofit operator for Portland Streetcar. They involve contracts for the first, project management services, which includes in part oversight of the vehicle engineering, testing, and certification that we need to occur before the vehicles can be put in service. The second item addresses the vehicle engineering services provided by LTK. They are the actual professional and technical leads who provide the oversight at OIW on the behalf of the city. So together, these represent amendments totaling about $333,000. We do have contingency within the East Side Portland Streetcar Loop budget. I believe in April, with the last council action, there was approximately $1.6 million in contingency. With these items, that would be approximately $1.25 in contingency remaining to fully complete the project.
What does fully complete the project mean?
For us, it means closing out the contract with OIW after receipt of the vehicles and having their success in
vehicles?
service.
How many
We
vehicles?
have a contract for 5 vehicles. We have received 3. 2 are in service. The third one is expected to be in service this week.
It's been certified by the federal government as transit ready, or whatever the term is?
The safety certifications involve, as I understand it, a number of agencies, and we are expecting that safety certification on the third vehicle this week.
This week. And vehicles 4 and 5, where are those?
According to the latest schedule proposed by Oregon Iron Works, we'll be seeing those delivered this fall in September and October.
September and October.
That's correct.
Good news.
It is.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I mean, continue. I just,
No, please do. Your staff were great about contacting us early and asking questions, both about the amount of contingency and whether or not any future amendments would be coming forward. I think it's likely with the schedule proposed for OIW, it is possible that there will be future amendments because we negotiate each of these amendments based on the amount of work done over a period of time as a way to try to control cost. So once we get actual receipt of the 5th vehicle, it is possible that there will be a subsequent amendment for services for engineering oversight.
so, like I said, if you want to finish your presentation, I have some more questions, but go ahead and
I would say in closing, repeat what the commissioner indicated, which is that the project budget has contingency funds to cover the services provided, that we are in a position where we want very much to see the work completed to be able to close out the East Side Loop project as in its entirety, as well as close out the grant with the federal government. So beyond the vehicle work that is talked about here, I'd like to just give you a heads up that when the feds invest the money that they have, in this case over $75 million, they very rightly require a before and after study. And that is over a 2-year period of time. So we'll be looking at September 12 through September 14. The due date for that before and after study is at the end of calendar year 2014. So that is when we would actually finally reach completion and closure of the project grant and closeout.
Greg Jones with Bureau of Transportation. The last time we were before you for an amendment, I believe you also asked for a lessons learned study as we complete the project, and I think we would try to incorporate that with the before-after work that we would be doing on the part of the Federal Transit Administration, so that we can identify all the different things that went well and some lessons learned about the things that haven't gone as well.
So we're paying Portland Streetcar and LTK for their time and efforts. And those time and efforts can, as you gave a little foreshadowing, it sounds like the streetcars 4 and 5 are probably going to slip from September and October, which has been a consistent pattern here we've had with Oregon Iron Works is not getting vehicles certified for service on time. So why don't we pay based upon delivery of the vehicles as opposed to just, I mean, it sounds to me like we're just doing open-ended contracts with Portland Streetcar and LTK. And
So
there's no tangibles connected with those efforts. We just keep dipping into contingency until we burn right through it.
So as a newcomer to streetcar, one of the things that was explained to me is the service that LTK provides is being on site while the manufacturing is occurring, in addition to being present once we receive the vehicle and work through safety certification. So to the extent that OIW has the cars and does work on them, we need to have our quality assurance representative there.
Yeah, I think the question that Commissioner Novick raised is a critical one, which is, okay, we need to pay for project management while the project's going on, and it's going on longer than expected. And we need to pay for engineering oversight of the vehicles while they're being constructed, because that's required, but we're paying for more of that service over a longer period because it's taking longer to build the vehicles. When it gets to the bottom line, closeout of the contract with Oregon Iron Works, not with these quality control vendors, Portland Streetcar Inc. and LTK, we have an issue, right?
Right. I mean, basically, if Oregon Iron Works were delivering us perfectly functioning vehicles on time, there'd be no need to continue to pay the oversight contractors. Right. So the issue is really with Oregon Iron Works rather than with the oversight contractors.
Yeah, I guess the question I'm trying to frame, though, is are we going to run out of money to pay the oversight contractors before we get vehicles? I mean,
Oh, it doesn't look like it, but
No.
yeah.
No, it doesn't. We're nowhere in that kind of range where we would run out of funds for that.
Well, I mean, these two contracts combined today are $330,000. So, and that leaves 1.2 million left in contingency.
Approximately.
What was our contract amendment in April? How much money was that?
Similar, right.
I think it was a similar amount.
I have it with me, but not here. I can certainly answer that question.
So, I mean, if we're doing contract amendments in the nature of $300,000 per shot, then I could see, 4 more contract amendments and no more contingency. What happens then? Who's on the hook?
So we are obligated to complete the East Side Loop project. And the City of Portland, I'm confident, will do so. The negotiations with Oregon Iron Works is a separate contract from what is the action before you today. And we have the contingency that we have to work with. I don't think that any of the parties are unaware of the limitation of those dollars.
Actually, Commissioner, my response would be that although normally you settle accounts with a contractor like Oregon Iron Works at the end of the contract, if we're coming to the point where we're running out of money, then I would go to Oregon Iron Works and say, hey, we need to address this sooner. And if we can't fund this because of your delays, then you need to help us get it through.
And Commissioner Novick, I just wanted to clarify, so you met with the president of United Streetcar last week. Mr. Harder? Or
Actually, I misspoke. It's Kevin Clark, not Kevin Carter.
Kevin Clark, okay. And he said he understands the need for Oregon Iron Works or United Streetcar to make us whole for the delays that they have caused with streetcar delivery.
He said that he understood that these delays are unacceptable, and I made it clear that we expect them to make us whole, and they recognize that that is our intention.
So he said that to you? Okay. Okay.
And the duration of this extension for these two contracts?
The services provided by LTK currently expire on August 31st.
Yeah.
This would extend them until October 31st.
By which time, according to the current schedule, you expect to have vehicles delivered? Okay.
Yes.
But your point's well made, Commissioner Salzman. At some point, we could, all the sand could run out of the hourglass here, or all the dollars run out of the hole in the bottom of the bucket, and we would be in trouble. So that's why it's good that I think Commissioner Novick had this conversation and put the company, the vendor, on notice that our problem is their problem. Thank you for doing that. Okay, other questions for the team? Anyone signed up?
They left.
Okay, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Roll call on the first item.
766, Saltzman.
Well, I think I've indicated my growing concerns here, but I am going to support these, but I am reaching the limits of my endurance of how many more contingency taps I will support, especially if the goal line keeps getting moved on us by Oregon Iron Works. Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Hales.
Aye. 767.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Hales.
Aye. 768.
Set a hearing date, 9:30 a.m. Wednesday, September 18, 2013, to vacate a portion of Southwest Fairview Boulevard at Southwest Chaplain Drive.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. We haven't met. My name is Dee Walker. I'm with Right-of-Way Acquisition for the Bureau of Transportation. And before you is just an item for requesting a street vacation of a portion of Southwest Fairview, and it's just to set the hearing. So that's...
Can I ask you a question on this? We appreciate you coming here to seek a hearing date. Are you required to do this, or?
I have been told by our office and management that it is necessary for us to come and put this on regular agenda. I'm not quite sure why. These historically have always been on consent.
Right.
Commissioner, we are going to, this is a direction that went out a while ago, and we need to sort that out, and I suspect we'll go back to the previous practice.
I would just say, if the previous practice is setting, if it's a matter of a ministerial function of setting a hearing date, I think we'd all be willing to delegate that function to the Bureau.
Well, it goes on consent anyway, so we can pull it if we want to.
Dan and I both have long speeches we were going to read in connection with this thing, but in light of the time, we'll hold our fire.
Merciful. Okay.
I would suggest too that issues like the typo in the amount of money could also be on consent.
Yeah, I'm curious about that one myself. Okay, thank you. No one signed up to testify, I assume. And it's just a report, so we'll accept the report.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Roll call.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you for sitting through this fascinating morning of democracy. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Hales.
Aye, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. 769.
Amend ordinance to remove Exhibit A relating to the phased implementation of the Northwest Parking Meter District and Area Permit Parking Program.
Some comments, Commissioner Novick, before we take a roll call on this.
I just want to note that although some people may be aware that there may be a delay in the actual delivery of meters to implement the Northwest Parking Plan, that doesn't affect this ordinance or what we voted on last week. There's no need for amendments.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
Second reading, roll call.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Fritz.
Well, I have, since the hearing last week, heard from several constituents who were concerned that, having been out of town for vacation and such, that they were not aware of the new plan coming forward. Given that there may be a delay anyway, and also that this is something that can be continued to be amended, I view this as a living document that we've already proven that we've amended it within 6 months, 7 months of its initial adoption. So with those provisos, I'm comfortable with voting aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Hales.
Real progress in a difficult balancing act. Thank you. Aye. 770.
Revise enforcement provisions to standardize language related to Bureau of Environmental Services program enforcement activities.
Second reading, roll call.
Saltzman.
Well, this is good work, Commissioner Fish and Bureau of Environmental Services. This really, I think it helps to have a lot more consistent enforcement procedures and hearing ability. Aye.
Novick.
As a former environmental law enforcer myself, I appreciate the Bureau's attention to having a strong and transparent enforcement program. Aye.
Fish.
I'm either the third or the fourth commissioner in charge of the Bureau of Environmental Services since Christmas. So I would be remiss if I didn't thank all the people who actually did the work on this as we vote on it, and especially thanks to my new Bureau. Mayor, I will tell you that in my 7 weeks, 8 weeks on the job, in addition to the honeymoon being over and a group of citizens saying that they can do a better job running the Bureau than me, I would say that the most wonderful revelation to me has been in getting out in the field and meeting the professionals who actually do the work of the Bureau of Environmental Services throughout the city, at the wastewater management facility, at our lab, at Cathedral Park, and places in between. And we are blessed to have an incredibly talented and dedicated group of professionals who work for us. And this work is a reflection of the quality of their work. And so I am pleased to vote aye.
My apologies, Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you. Thanks to Commissioner Fish and Emily York in your office for getting back to us with the information that we requested last week. On this one, I haven't heard a storm of protest or even a minor expression of protest. So again, I'm comfortable voting aye.
Hills.
Good work. Aye. And we are recessed until tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m.